American Comics, opening sign in Accelerator. Chapter 176. Thor is coming again. Agent Romanoff, do you miss me? It's Tony. The guy is finally here. Hearing this familiar voice, Natasha Romanoff and Phil Coulson couldn't help but smile. And Levis was a little unhappy when he heard the voice of the saucy bag. The question of the Phoenix power fragment in Natasha Romanoff's body has not yet been answered. Tony's frivolous tone always has the feeling that his own woman is being molested. Looks like I'll have to give Tony a little warning later. If I remember correctly, Tony also had a bad idea about Natasha Romanoff. A fire flashed across the sky, and immediately rushed to Loki. The palm of his hand opened fire, and instantly blasted Loki, who was so powerful just now. 570. Try moving your reindeer head again? The careful tracking missiles and palm cannons on Tony's shoulders were all aimed at Loki. Seeing this, Loki showed a strange smile without a trace, and then raised his hands in surrender. On the return flight, Steve always felt that Loki's surrender was too easy. Thinking of this, he looked at everyone and said, "Do you feel something is wrong?" He surrendered too easily. Simple. Isn't it normal for our rock killer Matt to surrender obediently after being beaten up? Old people just like to think wildly, which can easily make you sleepless, Tony said disapprovingly. Hearing this, Steve couldn't help frowning and didn't speak. And Tony seemed addicted to his tongue, and continued, "Well, I shouldn't question your ability to sleep. After all, you've been a popsicle for 70 years. Steve was stunned speechless. Levi's on the side laughed directly, attracting the attention of the two. Cough cough. Captain Steve, don't pay too much attention to Tony's words. He is such a person who likes poisonous tongues. You can try to fight back. Fight back? Steve doesn't understand what that means. You should know that I don't like being called a poisonous tongue. Tony was a little offended by what he said. Seeing this, Levi stepped forward and hooked him by the neck to the rear of the cabin. Tony, I have something to tell you. So mysterious. You don't mean to say that you are actually gay, do you? Tony said venomously. Levi's has long been immune to Tony's vicious tongue. Although this guy doesn't say it, he cares more about what everyone thinks of him than anyone else. What I'm trying to say is, you can't be so frivolous with Natasha Romanoff anymore. 35. You want to say that you targeted Romanoff's agent, but I don't agree. Tony raised his eyebrows and looked at him in surprise. You don't care about this, unless you want to try the feeling of the steel armor being disintegrated. Levi's narrowed his eyes and threatened. Hearing this, Tony couldn't help but think about the feeling of the steel armor suddenly disintegrating when flying in the sky or fighting. Ah. Well then, that's right, Uncle Tony, you already have pepper, don't you? Levi smiled and patted Tony's shoulder hard. Tony just felt a little speechless. Didn't he just tell him not to tease the female agent? Does he need such a threat? It was at this time. Lightning flashes across the sky suddenly. The deafening thunder sounded into everyone's ears, and Loki, who was sitting upright, trembled subconsciously, and looked out the window involuntarily. What? Are you afraid of thunder? Steve saw his reflection a little suspicious. No, I just don't like guys who follow lightning. 35. Loki said nonchalantly. Steve was about to say something else, but the plane shook violently, as if something had landed on top of the plane. Immediately afterwards, all the lights in the plane were damaged by an inexplicable current, even some precision instruments. Seeing this, Steve and Tony are both ready to fight. Who's here? Another Asgard? Steve asked suspiciously. It should be Thor, Levi's explained briefly. Really Thor? Tony remembered the guy with the hammer last time, saying he opened the plane door. Then a man with messy blonde hair, a red cloak on his arms and a hammer in his hand stood in front of him. Tony raised his palm cannon subconsciously, but was smashed by Thor's hammer in an instant. Immediately after, Thor called roar without fighting, grabbed Loki and flew out. Hey, don't you guys know each other? Why didn't he hire Roar? Steve looked at Levi's suspiciously. According to the information given by Nick Fury, Levi's had helped Thor, so the relationship between the two should be pretty good. Maybe didn't notice me. Levi's groped the 4.1 bar. Thor thought Loki was dead since Loki fell from Bifrost. Now that we meet again, he has no time to care about other people. This bastard. 35. Thor got up on the ground very unhappy, and then planned to catch up. He was inexplicably smashed with a hammer, and he couldn't bear it. Wait for Stark, we have to make a plan first. 35. Steve hurriedly dissuaded him when he saw that he wanted to chase him impulsively. Planning is fighting. 35. Tony rushed out after saying that. Seeing this, Steve looked helpless. This year's team members are really too difficult to lead, and he doesn't listen to the captain's words at all. Chapter 177. The Three Giants of the Women's Federation. Captain, I advise you not to go. Seeing Steve put a parachute on his back, Natasha Romanoff persuaded him. After all, they can fly, so what's the fun if you can't fly? Steve shook his head. However, as captain he had to go. Then he jumped out of the plane. Vice, aren't you going? 99. Natasha Romanoff couldn't persuade Steve, and then turned his eyes to Levi's, who was sitting beside the old god. Me? Do you want me to go? Levis folded his arms and looked at Natasha Romanoff with interest. I thought you went back. Natasha Romanoff shrugged and turned her head. The other side. Thor grabbed Loki and threw him roughly to the ground. Loki, tell me, where is the Tesseract? Did you miss me? Loki didn't get angry, but instead looked smug. We all thought you were dead. Thor's serious expression disappeared, and there was only excitement and guilt. Really? You mourned for me? Loki was a little afraid to face Thor's eyes. Definitely mourned. And our father and mother too, Thor said with a little sadness. Hearing this, Loki's expression turned cold. That's your father, he should have told you about me. But we were all raised by him. We grew up together and fought side by side. Have you forgotten all this? Thor said sadly. No, I have always lived in your shadow, and I will never forget being pushed into the abyss by you. 35. Loki has always known that he cares about him very much to protect him, but this is not what he wants. He wants the approval of his brother. The approval of his father. Rather than a person who will only be protected. But all this is impossible. In his opinion, Odin has already arranged everything, and it is impossible for him to get the throne. What's more, he's just a kid who was picked up. But now he has another plan. During my time in exile, I have seen a world you don't know, and I know the real living of Tesseract. When I take control of him, I can regain the throne. Loki lays out his ambitious plans. But Thor got the point. Loki, who told you about the power of the Tesseract? Who was behind you? I was originally a king, said Loki, who was interrupted. But not here. Thor also roared. Loki, hand over the Tesseract, let go of your ambitions, and go home with me. Hearing this, Loki softened for a moment, but soon he was firm. The Tesseract is not in my hands, I have transferred it. Thor was a little anxious when he heard the words, seeing that your own stupid brother is determined to go all the way to the dark. Listen to me. Thor raised his hammer and was about to speak harshly. However, at this moment, a fire flew over from a distance, and then knocked him out of the unprepared. I'm listening. When Loki saw his brother being beaten, he couldn't help showing a happy smile. The other side. After knocking Thor into the air, Tony finally got his revenge. However, being knocked off so inexplicably, Thor was also very angry. Will you try to touch me again? Only if you don't rob us. Tony opened his mask and slapped back. Do you know who you are facing? 99. Are you an actress? Does your mother know you stole her shawl? Tony's mouth is still so poisonous. This is obviously mocking the red cape behind Thor, and his sarcasm was unsurprisingly successful, and Thor at the moment was surging with anger. Without much nonsense, he smashed Tony out with a sneak attack. Then Tony also sneaked a palm cannon and knocked Thor into the air. Then the two scuffled together. I have to say that Tony's armor has become stronger and stronger after so many replacements. Even he was fought back and forth with Thor. Thor's all-important lightning strike is a mobile power bank for Tony's steel armor. Definitely, maybe Toldo can blast the steel armor with a few thunderbolts. The two were fighting and fighting, but fortunately, Steve came in time to stop the fight between the two. The three giants of the Avengers have officially met. Definitely, and Levi's watching the show. Have you had enough? Let's go back. Levi's yawned. After half an hour, the crowd returned to the sky carrier with Loki. Nick Fury had already prepared a cage for him, although it wasn't for Loki. Let's say it first, don't think about running away. Even touching the glass around you will make you fall from a height of 9 kilometers. Understand? Levi's on the side couldn't help but curled his lips when he heard his words. Can this cage hold Loki, and the exit can be opened by itself? Chief Braised Egg doesn't think he can kill Loki. Does he? Although the original book doesn't say that Loki can fly, it's too bad for Omegas to not be able to fly. Kamar-Taj is flying magic, and there is no way that Asgard can't. So this cage is completely fictitious for Loki. But Levi's didn't need to remind Nick Fury. Chapter 178 Making Phil Coulson a Mutant. Who do you think is the Ant now? Looking at Loki locked in a cage, Nick Fury only felt much more relaxed in his heart, and this time he finally avenged his previous revenge at the military research base. Your cage is really nice, but because it wasn't made for me, right? Loki pointedly said. After he finished speaking, he looked at the camera above, and he knew that the person should also be staring at the situation here. It's obviously a stupid beast. But you want to disguise yourself as a normal person. You want to rely on such a beast to protect you? It's stupid enough. Faced with Loki's taunting, Nick Fury was also worried about Dr. Banner's emotional instability, and immediately changed the subject. You are the fool. You went to war on Earth and stole the Tesseract from us, but now you will pay dearly. 5. Really? I don't think so. Loki looked disapproving. Nick Fury didn't say anything when he saw this, and he didn't bother to talk nonsense with the prisoner, and turned to leave the room. At the same time, in the conference room, Thor and Dr. Banner, who had been staring at the surveillance screen, had different expressions. Dr. Banner's face was a little unnatural. Obviously the beast in Loki's words was referring to him. But fortunately he didn't care about it. This guy's words are really ugly. Dr. Banner looked at Levi's beside him, trying to ease the awkward atmosphere. Levis offered casually, maybe you could transform and beat him up. It's not a good proposition. Steve on the other side heard him actually suggesting that Dr. Banner transform into a hurried objection. After seeing the information Nick Fury gave him about the Hulk, he was very cautious about how to deal with the big guy. Use it well, then add a general to the team. If you don't use it well, you will suffer. It can be said that among the team today, Dr. Banner is the one that gives Steve the most headache. Thinking of this, Steve changed the subject. He looked at Thor who was walking around and asked, Thor, what do you think he wants to do? 99. He has an army under him called Chitauri. They are not from God's domain, and they do not belong to any planet. Loki intends to lead them to attack the Earth. I think he got Tesseract to let this army in. Thor guessed road. You mean an alien army? Steve's face turned serious when he heard this. That is, he wants to use Tesseract to open the portal, so he took Dr. Selvig away. 9. Banner took over. Selvig. Thor was a little unfamiliar with the name. He's an astronomer, Dr. Banner explained. I still don't understand why Loki surrendered and how did he command the army here? Steve frowned. I don't think the focus should be on Loki. The guy's mind is so hard to fathom that I'd say he's a lunatic. Dr. Banner gave his opinion. However, Thor on the side was a little unhappy when he heard this. You better pay attention to what you say. Anyway, Loki isn't as good and also my brother. Although Loki is a frequent prankster and has planned a coup d'etat, Thor believes he is still a good brother, so he definitely chooses to forgive him. But he killed more than 80 innocent people 2 days ago. Natasha Romanoff said, suddenly looking up. Hearing that, Thor was stunned for a moment, and then his expression remained unchanged. He just picked it up. 35. These words made everyone speechless, and it was too fast to clear the relationship. Dr. Banner still expressed his opinion. I think his plan is related to some kind of machinery. He appeared in Stuttgart for the metal iridium, but what does he want the iridium to do? You can make stabilizers. At this point, Tony and Phil Coulson came over. This new teleportation won't collapse like the one before SHIELD. Tony walked and said that he came to Thor, patted him on the shoulder and said, your hammer is very powerful, big man. Really? Plus, that portal can be made bigger and last longer depending on Loki's needs. Tony walked in as if he had become the protagonist and started talking at length, and although his guesses were correct, Levis was not interested in it. Phil Coulson wait. 35. Seeing Phil Coulson getting ready to leave, Levis hurried up. What's wrong? Phil Coulson looked at him suspiciously. Come with me, I'll give you something good. Levis put his arm around his shoulder and walked to the other side. Both Natasha Romanoff and Steve noticed the scene, but didn't pay too much attention. Is it possible to make my hair grow back? Seeing him so mysterious, Phil Coulson made a joke. Well, it's really possible. Levis nodded and took out a test tube. The liquid in the test tube evaporated instantly after being taken out. Phil Coulson only felt a strange smell. What's this? Phil Coulson quickly held Draw's breath, but it was too late. The strange gas had been inhaled by him. Although he believed that Levis would not harm him, it was still a bit baffling. How do you feel? Levis didn't rush to explain. Feel? Unable to hold back, Phil Coulson sucked in Raw's mouth, and at the same time he only felt a heat current in his body that made hot sweat on his forehead. Immediately afterwards, the body seemed to be back to when it was young, full of vitality, and the previous fatigue was also swept away. Chapter 179 The Cause and Effect of Natasha Romanoff. Phil Coulson jumped involuntarily, then asked, what the hell was that? Definitely a good thing. Some rich people even spend hundreds of millions of dollars for this thing. 99. Levis explained with a smile, then turned and left. Only Phil Coulson was left with a confused face. But he didn't care too much about his body that felt like he was 20 years younger, and he didn't believe Levis would harm him anyway. After all, the two had known each other for so long. He thought he knew Levis very well. Back in the meeting room, seeing that everyone has dispersed, Levis is also ready to rest. However, outside the room where Loki is being held, he happens to meet Natasha Romanoff. Hey, does Natasha Romanoff have time for a walk? Levis invited with a smile. Natasha Romanoff looked at Loki in the room and then at him, then nodded. Okay then. 55. On the deck of the Sky Carrier, the two walked together, and the atmosphere was somewhat silent. Natasha Romanoff looked at him strangely. Is there anything you want to tell me? 570. Actually I wanted to ask if you can feel the difference in yourself. Different? Natasha Romanoff wondered. Seeing this, Levis didn't bother to beat around the bush, and asked directly, I mean the power in your body. Hearing this, Natasha Romanoff finally showed a complicated expression, which surprised him a little. The previous Natasha Romanoff was really good at covering up, and he didn't see any flaws at all. And at the moment he had already determined that the fragments of the Phoenix Force within Natasha Romanoff were definitely related to him. But the problem is that I haven't met Natasha Romanoff a few times at all. What's going on? I think it's better for you to find the answer yourself. 35. Natasha Romanoff turned to look at the dark sky. Is there anything I can't know? Seeing her like this, Levis was even more puzzled. I won't tell you unless you use telepathy on me. Natasha Romanoff turned and left, as if not caring at all about the memory being probed. But what she said surprised Levi's, because Natasha Romanoff actually spoke telepathically. This super ability is known to no one except Professor X and Lorna, who are a limited number of people. But how did Natasha Romanoff know? And if Nick Fury knew he could telepathically, he certainly wouldn't have allowed himself to join the Avengers. After all, there are too many secrets in his mind. He can't bet that Levi's will probe the secrets in his mind whenever he's curious. Watching Natasha Romanoff leave, he didn't use telepathy on her, and became more and more curious. What kind of story does he have with Natasha Romanoff? On the other side, after leaving, Natasha Romanoff came to the room where Loki was being held. In fact, she wanted to come before, but was delayed by Levi's. "You came earlier than I thought." Loki looked at her with interest, as if he knew she was coming. "You knew I was coming?" Natasha Romanoff asked, frowning. "That's right, but I thought Nick Fury would torture me a bit before that, until finally I was really helpless, which would make you appear to get my information." 5. Loki obviously knew Natasha Romanoff's intentions long ago. In fact, Nick Fury has also thought about torture and extorting a confession from Loki. As the head of the agent, he certainly doesn't mind using this method. But the problem is that Thor is still on the helicarrier. If he dares to use these shady methods to deal with Loki, Thor will not run away in minutes and become a madman. Even making a scene on the Skycarrier is not out of the question. Natasha Romanoff's expression didn't change. "I'm here to find out what the hell did you do to Barton?" Contrary to Loki's expectations, the woman in front of him was not here to seduce, but to find a lover, which made him very unhappy, who had been short of love since childhood. "I opened his mind." Opened his mind? What if it was successful? "Are you asking this out of love?" Loki looked out the door and asked playfully. "Children only fall in love. I just owe them favors." Natasha Romanoff's face remained unchanged, and she began to talk about her story with Hawkeye. Levi's, who was standing outside the door, heard her narration a little strange, because Natasha Romanoff's experience was different from what she knew. Natasha Romanoff actually joined Shield voluntarily, and Hawkeye is just her leader and predecessor. This makes Levi's wonder, has Natasha Romanoff's past been changed? Has the past been changed? Thinking of this, Levi's eyes suddenly lit up. In an instant he understood why Natasha Romanoff had the power of the Phoenix within him. Boom! The door to the room was suddenly pushed open. Natasha Romanoff, who was still talking about the past, turned around and saw Levi's come in. "You shouldn't have come in." 35. Natasha Romanoff is a little helpless, because she has been preparing for a long time in order to obtain information about Loki. "No need, let me tell you the purpose of Loki's words just now. In fact, he just wanted to anger Dr. Banner and everyone, and make everyone mess up." 99. Levi's said and came to Natasha Romanoff, looking at her sharply. Chapter 180. Natasha Romanoff's confession, lessons Loki. Natasha Romanoff was a little guilty by his gaze. "You know all about it?" "Definitely. You can't lie to me." Levi's hugged Natasha Romanoff with one hand. Natasha Romanoff watched his eyes soften suddenly, and there were even tears in his eyes. "You know I waited a day. How long?" "Sorry for making you wait so long." Levi's hugged her tightly apologetically. After knowing that Natasha Romanoff's past is different from what he knew, he guessed that Natasha Romanoff's past had been changed, and he was obviously the only one who could change the past. That is, someday in the future. Levi's will use the super ability to travel back in time and change Natasha Romanoff's life. It is also because of this that Natasha Romanoff has the fragments of the Phoenix Force in his body. After figuring out all this, he was also very guilty. After all, Natasha Romanoff was only 20 or 30 years younger than Captain America. That is to say, Natasha Romanoff has been waiting for him for over 50 years. This feeling really moved him. Loki on the side was caught off guard and ate a large bowl of dog food, and suddenly got a little angry. "Aren't you trying to save Barton? I'll let him kill you with his own hands, then wake him up, let him see his masterpiece, and finally I'll cut off his head, and someone has to pay for it. Ha 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 tilde." Loki laughed wildly. "Shut up." Levi's gave him a nonchalant look, and the next moment Loki obediently shut his mouth, even biting his tongue because he laughed so loudly. "Can you rescue Barton?" Natasha Romanoff asked suddenly. Levi's was a little upset that Natasha Romanoff cared so much about the Hawkeye stuff. Boo tilde. Natasha Romanoff saw his mind at a glance and kissed him on the cheek. "Barton has helped me a lot, and I'm so different in age from him. Don't think about it. I've been waiting for you all these years." "Really? Didn't just use my hands when thinking about me?" Levi's teased with a laugh. Natasha Romanoff immediately rolled his eyes at him. "Don't worry. The Hawkeye guy will be fine. Even if he dies I will save him. Now you can rest assured." 35. Hearing what he said, Natasha Romanoff couldn't rest assured. Loki in the cage wanted to say something, but couldn't open his mouth no matter what. "Natasha Romanoff, do you want to teach him a lesson?" Levi's put one arm around Natasha Romanoff's waist and laughed, even though Natasha Romanoff is now quite old. However, under the influence of the power of the Phoenix, there is no sign of aging, and his delicate face can even be compared with that of an 18-year-old girl, which makes him very satisfied. 18-year-old Natasha Romanoff is at the peak of her appearance, and it really makes him a little fond of it. Natasha Romanoff rolled his eyes at him and held down the big hand that was making trouble around her waist. How are you going to teach him a lesson? Hey, look at me. Levis looked at Loki maliciously, then pointed his finger up. In an instant, Loki's body in the cage was thrown into the air. Then he pointed his finger down. Loki's body fell to the ground again. Then Levi's fingers wiggled wildly, and Loki's whole body collided randomly around the cage. This funny scene made Natasha Romanoff next to him cover his mouth and chuckle. However, there was one person who couldn't laugh. It was Thor, who saw his younger brother being taught a lesson through surveillance. Seeing Loki being taught so badly made Thor very angry. His brother can only teach him a lesson, and no one else can. Boom. The door to the room was violently opened, and Thor walked in angrily. Vice, what are you doing? 46 Can't you see? Just teach your brother a lesson. Levi's raised an eyebrow and smiled, asking for flowers. Loki is my brother no matter what. He's from Asgard. Thor tried to grab Levi's collar with an angry look on his face. However, boom, Thor was blasted out before he even got close, and was embedded in the metal wall. I said, Thor, are you floating? How dare you fight me? Don't forget who helped you defeat the destroyer so you can return to Asgard. Levi's found that Thor's arrogance has not changed. Maybe he admits that the Earth and Asgard are equal on the surface, but in fact, he still thinks that the Earth is just a vassal of Asgard. Point zero. Definitely, maybe Thor is just trying to protect his younger brother. But if he dared to be arrogant in front of him, he would not be merciful. Vice, don't be impulsive. Natasha Romanoff saw that he wanted to teach Thor a lesson and quickly stopped him. After all, Thor was the king of Asgard, and he also came to help them. It's not good to have a relationship. Forget it. Presumably this lesson should be able to make him clear that the Earth is not a subsidiary of Asgard, and if he doesn't face this, war will come sooner or later. 5. After Levi's finished speaking, he pulled Natasha Romanoff out of the room. His words are not alarmist. Now the era of mutants is coming soon, and the overall strength of the Earth will increase rapidly. The strength of 4th-level mutants is difficult to deal with even with Thor's current strength, and even some 3rd-level mutants of Bbook can pose a threat to Thor. And once the era of mutants is opened, perhaps the 4th-level mutants are still very rare, but the 3rd-level mutants will definitely not be few. At that time, the strength of the Earth may become the first of the 9 kingdoms. Even Asgard gets stomped on. In this case, if Thor still treats the Earthlings with the previous attitude, the war will come sooner or later. Chapter 181. Thor, are you dissatisfied? The Lost Avengers. At the same time, things on this side also alarmed Nick Fury and Tony. Looking at Nick Fury with a dark face, Levi's pouted and ignored him. This made Nick Fury's face even darker. Hey, you're really good. I've wanted to beat those brothers for a long time, but I didn't expect you to be one step ahead of me. Tony walked over and winked with a smile. I mean, do you believe they did it first? Levi's shrugged. Mr. Vice is really good. Dr. Banner couldn't help sighing after seeing the tragic state of the 2 brothers in the surveillance room. As expected of an existence capable of hanging and beating hatred, he felt more at ease. It's so irrational that you 570 do this. It will make the relationship between Asgard and us. Captain America wanted to say something, but was interrupted. I don't care if it doesn't matter. I only know that I will beat up anyone who is unhappy. What? Captain? Do you want to try it too? 35. Levi's looked at Steve with a half smile. Don't talk about Vice. Isn't it okay for everyone to be nice? 35. Natasha Romanoff saw that the 2 were arrogant, so she had to stand up to smooth the game. We got some news through Loki just now. His purpose is Dr. Banner. No, he wants to make me suspicious of each other and cause civil unrest. Is the target me? Actually, I already knew he was targeting me. From the previous name of the beast called Raw, Banner knew that Loki was facing him. Otherwise he would not have given him such an ugly nickname. Everyone can see this. Tony on the side waved his hand indifferently. Tony, I think he's talking about you when he talks about warming the world. Dr. Banner looked at Tony. Oh? Really? Tony raised an eyebrow. What does it mean to warm the world? To put it simply, it refers to the arc reactor that Tony said made, which is comparable to a nuclear bomb and has a wide range of uses. If one all exploded, wouldn't it make the Earth warmer? Actually, I figured out what they want to do with Tesseract. That's when Steve finally spoke, only to see him holding a weapon case in front of the crowd. They made weapons out of Tesseract. Hey, look, I'll just say they have such a secret. Tony opened the weapon case, took out the weapon inside and looked at it. It's an energy weapon made from the energy of Tesseract, and it's very powerful. I'm afraid one shot can penetrate the entire aircraft carrier directly from here. Tony is a weapons expert, and everyone still believes his words. But after knowing the power of this weapon is so great, everyone fell silent. It was at this time Nick Fury walked in with Thor. Yes, we did use the power of the Tesseract to make weapons, but it's all about protecting the planet, and I think you all know that. We do knows that you used Tesseract to make weapons, and then you brought in the army of Loki and Chitauri. Tony responded immediately. Hearing this, Nick Fury was immediately speechless, and he immediately threw the blame on Thor. Well, It's all because of you. If it weren't for the previous Destroyer and Thor events, he wouldn't have thought about salvaging the Tesseract and the making weapons. Because of me? Thor had been fooled and wanted to apologize to Levis. After all, he was really impulsive before. But he didn't expect Nick Fury to throw the blame on him now. Last year, the Earth welcomed an alien visitor. His personal grievance led to the destruction of the Earth. We learned that there are not only policemen in the universe, but also much stronger than us. We Asgard have never had any ill will towards you, midget, Thor tried to explain. But you are not the only one in the universe. It shows that Loki and Chitauri today, if our Earth does not resist, who can protect the Earth? Nick Fury's remarks are so impassioned that everyone sounds like there is some truth to it. But it is precisely because you are studying Tesseract that this attracts Loki and Chitauri. For other civilizations, this is a signal that they are ready for war. Thor retorted. War? This is all forced by you, and we Earthlings have to take countermeasures. Nick Fury said. Countermeasures? Like nuclear deterrence? Tony couldn't help sneering behind him. Hearing this, Nick Fury was not happy, and he asked, Tony Stark, how did you get rich? 5. If he's still making weapons, war will come sooner or later. Steve on the other side was already upset about Tony 4.1 Stark, and he took this opportunity to retort. Hey, how come the spear is right on me? Tony just felt a little baffled. Isn't it always facing you? Steve asked rhetorically. Seeing that everyone was getting more and more powerful, Natasha Romanoff on the side was ready to persuade. Seeing this, Levis hurriedly used telepathy to protect her, and then pulled her aside. Everyone's emotions were irritated little by little, and it was obviously the ghost of Loki's psychic staff. However, he didn't need to remind everyone. Instead, he was very interested in the mind gem, and he still hasn't signed in today. Chapter 182 Signing into the mind gem, beating Hulk. Ding. Did the host sign into the mind gem? Double experience or super ability? Sign into super ability. Ding. Sign in is successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the super ability power of mind, with 100 experience points. After obtaining the power of the mind, Levis only felt that his telepathy became stronger in an instant. Originally, his telepathy could not cover the whole world. But now, after possessing the power of the mind, his telepathy can instantly cover the whole world, and he still has spare power. It can be said that the power of the mind is the advanced ability of telepathy. With it, Levi's telepathy is stronger and the more comprehensive. Thinking of this, he checked the system panel. As predicted, the super ability of telepathy has disappeared, replaced by the 22 power of the mind. Sure enough, the Infinity Stones are his lucky stars, not only consign in but also energy absorbing, which is almost W's. Vice, what happened to them? Natasha Romanoff, who was sober at this time, also saw that something was wrong with everyone. It should be affected by the power of this staff. Levis pointed to the psychic staff beside him. The power of the staff affects him? Not good. They have to wake up. After Natasha Romanoff heard his words, she suddenly remembered what her face looked like and was about to step forward, but she was hugged tightly by Levis. That's when Natasha Romanoff was puzzled. Boom. The sky carrier suddenly vibrated, followed by a violent explosion shockwave. The people who were still noisy just now were blasted away by this shockwave in an instant. It was at this moment that everyone woke up. Natasha Romanoff, who was protected by Levis, was not pinned down like the original, but Dr. Banner was a bit miserable, and he happened to be pinned down by the collapsed building. Tony, go and put on your armor. Levis reminded. Tony, who doesn't have a battle armor, is completely incompetent, and if he's not careful, he'll be stunned. I see. Tony promised and ran out, followed by Steve, his shield in the arsenal. It's the ghost of Loki. Thor also reacted, and then ran towards the place where Loki was imprisoned. Vice, Dr. Banner will be handed over to you. Norman agent, we must stop the enemy from invading. Nick Fury looked at the banner, which was pinned under the building, and left with Natasha Romanoff. Okay, I knew it would be so. 35. Looking at Dr. Banner, whose body was already turning green, Levis helplessly took out a small notebook from his pocket. It says how to beat the Hulk, as well as Hulk's weaknesses and attack methods. Forget it, it's useless at all. It's better to speak with fists. Levis looked at it and threw the notebook away. Boom. At this time, Dr. Banner, who was pressed under the building and completed his transformation, was just a building that shook his body away when he got up. Even a large piece of iron smashed over Levis. It's not good to litter. I'll give it back to you. He grabbed the flying iron piece and threw it back faster. Boom. The Hulk, who had his back to him, was smashed and staggered. Raw tilde. Hulk turned his head to look, then rushed over with a roar. Eat me a right hook, Levis said with his right fist and slammed it out. Boom. Hulk flew upside down in an instant and smashed against the metal wall, and even the entire sky carrier shook. However, such a little power definitely doesn't have much effect on the Hulk. I saw Hulk spit out the teeth in his mouth, and then looked at Levis fiercely. Raw tilde. With a roar, Hulk's body obviously swelled in a circle again, and then he rushed over again. Left hook. No, this time it's Sheng Long fist. Levis seemed to fight hard, and then an uppercut slammed into the Hulk's chin. Boom. I saw that Hulk's huge amounts of body were actually floated up, and then fell heavily to the ground. This time the strength is not light, and it still hits the weak point. She-Hulk was confused for a long time before he got up. Roar tilde. With a roar, Hulk still succumbed to defeat and rushed over. Seeing this, Levi's used telepathy to observe other places, and found that everything was developing according to the original plot, and he didn't need to do anything at all. Very well, then I'll play with you. He put his eyes on Hulk again, and then took the initiative to punch him. The battle between the two was not small, and the entire Sky Air 570 mother could feel it. This made Nick Fury a little worried that the Sky Carrier would be dismantled by them. Vice, how long will it take you to get it done? Or just throw the Hulk down? Nick Fury's voice suddenly came from overhead. It's over, and I'm done with it anyway. 35. Levi's, who had beaten the Hulk, moved his body a bit, only to feel refreshed. And Hulk at the moment has been beaten with bruised nose and face, changed back to the appearance of Dr. Banner. I'm afraid he is the only one who can beat Hulk so badly. It was at this time the Sky Carrier suddenly tilted up. Oops. Hawkeye hacked into the bridge's control room and used a virus to destroy the helicarrier's systems, causing one of the turbines to stop and the helicarrier to go down. Nick Fury's anxious voice echoed throughout the helicarrier. Everyone who heard this was a little anxious. They are at an altitude of 9,000 meters. If they fall, they have almost no possibility of survival. Chapter 183 Phil Coulson's Awakening. Mutants. Director, can you repair the damaged system? Levi's asked calmly. It will take about 10 minutes, not only to repair the system, but also to repair the turbine group. Otherwise, Nick Fury explained anxiously. Don't worry, we have more time. Hearing this, Nick Fury was still a little unclear, but the next moment the entire helicarrier returned to stability, and there was no sign of shaking. What's going on? Nick Fury looked confused. Jarvis told me that there is electromagnetic force around the helicarrier. It's Vice. You shot it. Tony, who was going to manually turn the turbine, knew right away what was going on. Was you did it? Not only Nick Fury, Thor and Steve were shocked when they heard Tony's words. Such a huge amount of helicarrier actually says that it can be controlled, which is too strong. It's just a small problem. You better hurry up and fix the turbo. Levi's calmly sat on the bar and poured himself a glass of red wine, then used perspective to check the situation on the helicarrier. When everyone heard what he said, they all relaxed, and then they all took action. But Levi's couldn't be alone in the limelight. It was while he was watching the play with a light drink. Thor on the other side finally came to the place where Loki was being held. However, as soon as he got here, he found that Loki had come out of his cage. Go back to me, Thor ordered and rushed over, trying to lock Loki back in. However, Loki had already seen through the mind of his stupid brother. I saw Thor pounced, but he didn't catch anything, because that was just Loki's usual prank. Instead, Thor threw himself into the cage. By the time he reacted, he was already locked inside by Loki. Stupid Odin's son, you really can't remember? Have you forgotten how many times I played you with this trick? Loki looked at Thor smugly. Thor slammed his hammer on the glass of the cage in anger. Boom. The glass made a loud noise, startling Loki. But fortunately, this glass is made by the Dragon Kingdom, so it is not so easy to be damaged. Seeing this, Loki's face was filled with a smug smile again. The Meridians think we are immortal gods. Do you want to try? As he said that, he came to the console, ready to throw Thor together with the entire cage from 9,000 meters above the ground to test whether God is immortal. Yet at this moment, do not move. Phil Coulson came to Loki at some point, holding an energy gun made with Tesseract energy. Loki looked at the energy weapon and felt a sense of crisis in his heart. Obviously this weapon could threaten him. I didn't expect it. After we sent the destroyer here, we started to develop this. I don't know how powerful it is. Do you want to try it? 99. Phil Coulson raised his gun and moved closer to Loki. Loki in front of him also raised his hand in cooperation. However, at this moment, a sharp blade suddenly pierced through Phil Coulson's chest from behind him. No! Thor cried out in grief when he saw Loki appearing behind Phil Coulson. It turns out that Loki in front of Phil Coulson was nothing more than a phantom. The real Loki had already appeared behind him, and pierced his chest with the psychic staff in his hand. Seeing this scene, Levi's couldn't help frowning. His sense of Phil Coulson was still very good. Otherwise, the X-Gene Awakening potion will not be given to him first. It can be said that in the Avengers, Phil Coulson is their bridge of communication. After all, every Avenger is drawn by Phil Coulson. So Phil Coulson must not die. Just when Levi was ready to rescue Phil Coulson, he suddenly discovered something amazing. I saw that Phil Coulson, who fell to the ground, was recovering quickly from the penetrating injury on his chest. He immediately thought of a possibility. Is this ... is it the super ability Phil Coulson obtained by awakening the X-Gene? Levi's was a little surprised. At present, it seems that Phil Coulson's awakened ability is related to the type of injury recovery, and it is not clear about the more specific. But now there is no need for him to take action. However, Phil Coulson didn't know that his injury was recovering. He only knew that Loki had to pay some price before he died. Seeing that Loki had thrown Thurlian down with the cage, he took the opportunity to pull the trigger directly. The next moment, the energy weapon in his hand released a shockwave. Loki was blasted out in an instant. However, Levis could see clearly that although the shot made Loki very embarrassed, it didn't hurt him. Time passed quickly. After more than 10 minutes, the spacecraft's control system and turbine group have been restored. The invading enemies have also been dealt with. Hawkeye was still subdued by Natasha Romanoff, but this time it was easier. At the same time, Lizzo's Nick Fury then remembered Phil Coulson. By the time he came to the room where Loki was being held, Phil Coulson looked like he was dying. "Sorry, boss, I let that guy get away," Phil Coulson said apologetically. "Stay awake, Phil Coulson, look at me, you'll be fine." 35 Nick Fury is a little angry and a little sad. "No, it's time for me to rest." 99 Phil Coulson just felt so tired that he wanted to sleep. "You can't rest yet." Nick Fury shook his head. "I'm all right, boss, they'll never be united unless you give them some motivation, and maybe my death will bring them together." 35 With that, Phil Coulson closed his eyes. Chapter 184 Phil Coulson's Suspended Death. The Deceived Avengers. Nick Fury saw tears in his eyes, and the anger in his heart made him clench his fists. At this moment, Levis suddenly appeared beside the two of them. Seeing him coming, Nick Fury suddenly had some hope, and he hurriedly said, "Vice, can you save him?" Levis shook his head. "Majafak, it was Loki who killed Phil Coulson, and I must avenge him." Nick Fury saw him shaking his head, knowing that Phil Coulson couldn't be saved, and suddenly burst into foul language in anger. Levis, however, looked at him strangely and said, "Who told you Phil Coulson was dead? What did you say?" It took Nick Fury a while to react after hearing this. "Phil Coulson is definitely not dead, you see," he said, and lifted off Phil Coulson's clothes, only to see that the chest that was penetrated just now had already healed. If it weren't for the bloodstains around him, he wouldn't have been injured at all. The reason why Phil Coulson fainted should be that the energy needed to recover from the injury was too much, causing him to be very tired. "How is that possible?" "You saved him?" Nick Fury asked with a frown. Levis shook his head. "I didn't save him, but he saved himself." "What do you mean?" Nick Fury frowned, not understanding what he meant. However, the next moment, he suddenly remembered something. "Mutant." "Yes, Phil Coulson has awakened the X gene to become a mutant." Levis nodded. Nick Fury was a little shocked when he heard it. He didn't expect Phil Coulson to awaken the X gene because of this. He didn't discriminate against mutants. Instead, Phil Coulson was relieved that he had saved his life by awakening the X gene. After all, Phil Coulson is his best player. "So who is he now?" Nick Fury was still a little worried, looking at Phil Coulson in a coma, and asked him suspiciously, "You should know that most of the abilities of mutants have flaws." Nick Fury nodded. "If my guess, XMan, is correct, Phil Coulson's super ability should be to heal the body, but it will consume a lot of energy in the body, so it will cause him to pass out. I think he should be fine after he sleeps, and if you feel uneasy, you can prepare some nutritious food for him," Levi suggested. So it was. 33 Hearing his words, Nick Fury finally breathed a sigh of relief, and then let the paramedics take Phil Coulson away. "Director, I think what Phil Coulson just said is right." What?" Nick Fury was still a little unresponsive. Seeing this, Levis sighed and explained, "I'm talking about stimulating the Avengers. Phil Coulson is right, they all have their own arrogance, and if something doesn't happen, they won't be united." Nick Fury's eyes lit up when he heard this. "You mean to trick them into saying that Phil Coulson is dead?" "That's a good idea." 9. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this method was very good. After all, he also knew about the relationship between Phil Coulson and the Avengers. If you know that Phil Coulson died because of this incident, the Avengers should be united with the enemy. Thinking of this, he immediately announced the news of Phil Coulson's death on the air carrier's broadcast. When they heard that Phil Coulson had died unexpectedly, everyone fell silent. In a conference room, after this battle, except for Thor, who had fallen, all the rest of the Avengers gathered here. However, the atmosphere in the conference room at the moment was a little heavy. "Who did it?" Tony asked, staring closely at Nick Fury. "It's Loki. He pierced Phil Coulson's chest with his scepter," Nick Fury replied. "Damn, if I knew that I should have killed him when I caught him, maybe there won't be so many things in the future." Dr. Banner is very angry about being forced to transform into the Hulk and then causing trouble for everyone. "He's Thor's brother, and we can't kill him." Steve looked up and said the harsh reality. Loki is Thor's younger brother anyway, and the second prince of Asgard. Not to mention that killing him would immediately trigger a war between civilizations, and Thor would definitely stop it. Nick Fury looked at Steve, then took some blood-stained cards from his pocket and placed them on the table. "It was found in Phil Coulson's coat, and I'm afraid he'll never get a chance to get your autograph." Steve looked at the cards with a heavy heart. "At the moment our communications equipment has been damaged. Tesseract and Thor are completely missing. There is nothing I can do, I have lost my best confidant. Nick Fury's words were very heavy and filled everyone with sadness. Even a somewhat evasive Tony sighed indifferently. However, at this moment, the people in the conference room were opened. Hey, Chief, I heard you took my treasured card. You know it's my most precious thing. Phil Coulson, with a sandwich in one hand, walked in while talking. When everyone in the conference room saw Phil Coulson, their eyes widened, and their minds were full of question marks. Then all eyes were on Nick Fury, apparently wanting a reasonable explanation. Nick Fury slapped his forehead with a headache when he saw this. He didn't expect Phil Coulson to wake up so quickly, which completely ruined his plan. Chapter 185 Phil Coulson's super ability. I think you should explain what the hell is going on here. Tony looked at Nick Fury badly, because he was so sad that he wanted to cry. They managed to hold back the tears, but they didn't expect Phil Coulson to appear in front of them. This is simply the biggest joke to him. Nick Fury was at a loss for words, not knowing how to explain it. Hey, boss, how can you get my card dirty? I want the captain to sign it. At this moment, Phil Coulson saw the blood-stained card on the table, and immediately picked it up with a distressed expression. Phil Coulson, what the hell happened to you? Seeing that Nick Fury didn't speak, Steve could only ask Phil Coulson. Oh, it's such a captain, I did get stabbed in the chest by Loki's staff before. 35 Phil Coulson touched his chest as he said that. It's just that after a good night's sleep, the wound actually recovered. Recovered? What's going on? Tony asked suspiciously. Did West reach you for you? They said I recovered it myself. Phil Coulson shook his head. How can a penetrating injury recover on its own? Unless it's a mutant. Dr. Banner said in disbelief. Dr. Banner is right. Phil Coulson has indeed become a mutant. Levi smiled and nodded. What? You're not kidding, are you? Phil Coulson couldn't believe it when he heard this. At this moment, Nick Fury, who was beside him, said, he is right. If you hadn't awakened the X gene, I'm afraid you'd already be dead. Hearing this, Phil Coulson had to believe that he had indeed become a mutant. Tony and Dr. Banner were also a little surprised when they saw this. They didn't expect Phil Coulson to become a mutant at a critical moment, thus saving his own life. So, your super ability is to restore the wound on your chest? Dr. Banner asked with interest. I don't know, but my chest injury did heal. Phil Coulson shook his head. Oh, by the way, and waking up hungry. As he spoke, he finished the sandwich in his hand in 3 or 2 bites. Like this sandwich, after he woke up, he had eaten 10 in a row. So how does it feel to be a mutant? Do you want to jump ship? Tony joked. Phil Coulson, we X-Men are very welcome to mutants like you with ability, and can help you develop ability. Your ability is a restoration type, maybe your hair can also be restored. Levi's followed Tony's words and dug up the wall on the spot. Nick Fury's face darkened when he heard this. Phil Coulson, you'll always be my right-hand man, and I've agreed with you on your application for an 8th level agent and a salary increase last time. Really? Thank you boss. Phil Coulson agreed immediately, then looked at Levi's and said, sorry, although I have become a mutant, I am still an agent of SHIELD 99. Levi's shrugged indifferently at this. He never thought he would be able to fool Phil Coulson in this way. Okay, now Director Nick Fury, you can tell us why you lied to us just now about Phil Coulson's death. Tony crossed his arms and asked. He hadn't forgotten the sadness. He nearly cried. Nick Fury just wanted to explain. Let me talk about this matter. Phil Coulson interrupted him, then turned to look at everyone and said, the reason why the boss will deceive everyone with my death is actually to unite everyone. Now Loki is playing us all by himself. If we don't unite, the Earth will be in trouble. 5. Seeking flowers. You should know that Loki has everything ready, and if we don't stop him, we'll be waiting for the Chitauri army. 99. Phil Coulson's words made everyone silent. The Phil Coulson agent is right. We really shouldn't continue the infighting. We should first find where Loki is and then crush his plot. Steve stood up and said, yes, we did intend to use Tesseract to make weapons, but I'm not betting all on it, but a risky plan. 995. Nick Fury said looking at Tony. We call it the Avengers program, and Stark and Vice should both know that the idea is to bring together the best people in the world and see if they can make huge amounts of it together against a mighty foe when you need them most. Now this ideal has been completed in half. You are all the best people in the world. I believe that if you can unite, no difficulties can stop you. Nick Fury's remarks made everyone enthusiastic, and also gave everyone an explanation for the previous use of Tesseract to make weapons. I agree with what you just said. We are all the best people in the world. Tony stood up and boasted very stinky. Time is running out. We really need to unite. Dr. Banner stood up and looked at Tony. Let's hurry up and find Loki's location. 35. It's up to my genius to act at the critical moment. Tony looked smug. Mountain. Chapter 186. Natasha Romanoff is in a hurry after all. Physical therapy. Vice, come with me. The meeting room dispersed, and Natasha Romanoff dragged Levi's into a room. Natasha Romanoff, you have to know that this is a critical moment. Although I know you haven't done that kind of thing for so long, and some desires are definitely natural, but... well, I'll settle the fight as soon as possible. 5. Levi said and hugged Natasha Romanoff, ready to go further. Natasha Romanoff pushed him away speechlessly. I didn't bring you here to do this. Well, I was just joking, I thought you would understand. 5. Levi shrugged, then saw Hawkeye bound in the room. Barton has been controlled by Loki's power 573 and has not woken up until now. I hope you can help him. Oh. No problem. Levi nodded, then punched Barton in the face without hesitation. What are you doing? Natasha Romanoff was startled when he saw him suddenly punching Barton. Didn't you say to wake Barton? 35. Levi said with an innocent look on his face. This is a physical awakening method, which is very direct and effective. Sure enough, after being punched again, Hawkeye, who was struggling just now, stopped. After a moment of nonsense, Hawkeye finally came to his senses. How did I wake up? Woke you up, Natasha Romanoff replied. Thank you very much. Hawkeye thanked, and then said with guilt, how many agents have I? Don't worry too much, those people died because of Loki, it has nothing to do with you, don't increase the guilt. Natasha Romanoff shook his head. Hawkeye wanted to say something else, but was interrupted by Levi's. You have just recovered, so you should have a good rest. Don't worry about other things, we will solve it. Hawkeye smiled helplessly. If I can shoot a few arrows on Loki, maybe I'll be very sweet. It's not easy to think who's in sense. I'll help you. Before Levi's could finish speaking, Hawkeye only felt a force on his neck, and then he passed out. Natasha Romanoff sighed helplessly. I'm doing this for his own good. After all, I just got rid of Loki's control, and now I need a good rest. Levi's shrugged. It's not too early, Natasha Romanoff, you should rest early too. Definitely, if you need my arms, I can always. Natasha Romanoff glanced at him involuntarily. The next day, in Tony and Steve's reconciliation, the two finally discover that Loki's target is Stark Tower. So the two split up, with Steve calling Dr. Banner and Tony calling Levi's. However, in Levi's room, Tony didn't see him. Damn, where has he been at this time? It won't be back to the Mutant Academy, will it? Tony had a headache, but he knew that Levi's had the ability to move in space. Maybe he went home to sleep last night. Sir, I called Mr. Levi's. Then Jarvis reminded him. Great Jarvis, can you find a place to play him? Tony was overjoyed. Sir, according to surveillance footage from last night, Mr. Levi's should be in this room at the moment. Jarvis finished projecting a map showing the coordinates of the room. Tony suddenly realized when he saw it, it's the Romanoff agent's room. I should have known it earlier. By the time Tony came out of the room, Levi's and Natasha Romanoff were all dressed up and out. Let's go. 35. Before Tony could speak, Levi's and Natasha Romanoff were the first to head towards the place where the Quinjet was parked. Tony could only make an international gesture at him when he saw this. Everyone got on the plane together. The Avengers are officially out. At the same time, Levi's has also secretly contacted Professor X and Magneto to lead the mutants to get ready near the Stark Industries building. Today will be the moment when the Age of Mutants officially begins. At the moment, everyone in the X-Men is hiding in a coffee shop. The owner of the shop has been controlled by Professor X. At the same time, a sign of closure has been hung outside the shop. Hey, are you saying there's going to be an alien invasion? Burning Man John looked up at the sky through the second-floor glass window. It should be true. What would it be like if there were aliens? Iceman Poppy rubbed his chin. Since it's an alien, just smash it all down. Colossus has turned his body into steel, and the half armor on his body can effectively assist him in battle. Everyone be quiet. We just need to follow the orders. Storm stopped the noise of several people. It was at this time, boom, an explosion roared from the top floor of the Stark Industrial Building. 4.1 Where did what happened? All eyes were drawn to the past. It was Tony Stark who was trying to attack a strange device, and he failed. Storm's eyes rolled, and she could see what was going on the roof. What should we do? Cyclops asked, habitually looking at Professor X in a wheelchair. Scott, you shouldn't ask me about this. Professor X shook his head. Vice told us to wait here, and he will notify us if he wants to make a move. 35 Logan sat on the side very calmly and stretched out his wolf claws to peel the apple. That's right, we just have to wait. Jean Grey also nodded. Chapter 187 Tony controlled by Loki. Top of the Stark Industries building. Tony at the moment, who was the first to set off, had already found Tesseract, and Dr. Selvig who was fiddling with the portal. Turn it off, Dr. Selvig. Tony's palms had stopped him, and he warned. It's too late, it can't be closed anymore. Open your eyes and see. A whole new universe is about to be revealed to everyone. Selvig's Dr. Chapter began to laugh excitedly. Then let me force him off. After Tony finished speaking, the cannon in the palm of his hand blasted out. Boom. After a loud bang, Tony was directly knocked back by the energy shockwave. Sir, the target has energy protection. We can't break it. Jarvis's voice sounded in Tony's ear. Damn. Then I'll have to talk to Loki. He must know how to stop the portal. Tony looked coldly at Loki who was admiring the scenery on the roof balcony. Sir, There is bad news. This armor is too damaged, and the power supply is not 22. The mechanical voice of Jarvis sounded again. Well, maybe I should wait for them to come together. Tony sighed helplessly. This time he was really impulsive, and now he is facing Loki alone, and he may be in danger at any time. When he took off his steel armor and walked in, Loki at the moment was already waiting here with a playful look on his face. Are you begging me for mercy? Can I say I'm actually here to scare you? Tony shrugged. Then you don't have to take off your iron. Loki sneered. The Chitauri army is coming. You can't stop it. That's not necessarily true. I still have some confidence in our team, not to mention that we still have Vice. Your plan is doomed to fail. Tony said he came to the bar and poured himself a glass of red wine. That mutant. 35. Loki's face turned gloomy when he heard this. He couldn't forget the scene of being played in the cage. Even if he is strong, Chitauri's army is endless, and he can't solve it alone. Really? Do you still want to try? Tony scoffed. Do you think that with the existence of you can really be the king of the earth? Even if your army is coming, even if we did not block the invasion of the army, we will put this account on your head. If we can't be the defenders of human civilization, then we will become the avengers of human civilization. Are you mentally prepared for this? Hearing this, Loki's heart trembled. Maybe he didn't care about the police officer at all. Even his brother he could easily play. But the mutant man hanged and beat him easily several times. Although he said he didn't care, he was a little scared in his heart. Can Chitauri really kill that mutant? It's almost impossible, right? However, he always deceived himself in his heart to think that the other party could not find him, and he had Chitauri's protection, even that person. Thinking of this, his complexion returned to normal. Then Mr. Tin Woodman, are you ready again? Be the first hero to be rebelled. Loki said, the psychic scepter in his hand stabbed at Tony's chest. Boom. After a crisp sound, the mind scepter has no effect at all. Loki looked bewildered, and he tried again. But it was still useless. It's normal for ability to fail. After all, I'm so handsome. Tony was about to give him a skin, but Loki suddenly tapped his scepter on his forehead. Do you think I'm stupid? Don't think that putting it in on your chest will make my ability invalid. I've seen idiots like you a lot. Loki smiled dismissively, and then ordered, now do you know who your enemy is? Definitely, my majesty. 35. Tony's eyes turned pitch black, and he turned to put on the steel armor. Soon Tony in steel armor was back. Go and stop them, whatever it takes, Loki ordered. Yes, your majesty. Tony nodded, then smashed the glass and flew out. At the same time, Levis, as they call it, the Quinjet, are also approaching the Stark Industrial Building. We're here, but what about that guy Tony? Natasha Romanoff, who piloted the fighter, looked at the Stark Industrial Building suspiciously at 573, but didn't see any movement. Maybe he has already solved the portal, and then waits for us to have a celebration dinner. Levis teased with a smile. He had actually seen Tony being controlled by Loki, but he wasn't in a hurry. The portal has been opened, Chitauri is destined to come, and it's time for his performance. He can't handle Loki alone. Steve shook his head. He didn't believe Tony could handle this alone. Although Loki's strength is not as good as mine, he cannot be defeated by ordinary mortals, not even Stark's tin box. 35. Thor didn't believe Tony could beat Loki at all. In fact Loki is just an illusion, and Tony has no choice. What's more, Loki's body is comparable to the Hulk, and he is unharmed after all kinds of attacks. Tony's weapons have no effect on him at all. Chapter 188. The arrival of the Qitarui army. Just as the Kunstile fighter was approaching the Stark Industrial Building, a flash of fire suddenly shot over. Watch out. It's a small missile, Dr. Banner reminded aloud. And then Natasha Romanoff steered the plane into a fancy spin to avoid the missile. However, the next moment, several small missiles shot over. This time the plane was unavoidable. Natasha Romanoff, don't worry. Levis put his hand on Natasha Romanoff's shoulder in reassurance, then looked at the small missiles. Rumbling. Blocked by psychokinesis, several small missiles exploded in the air instantly. The fighter plane rushed through the flames, and only then did they realize that it was Tony who fired the small missile just now. Tony, what are you doing? Natasha Romanoff tried to contact Tony's iron armor, but failed. This guy is controlled by Loki just like me before. Hawkeye immediately thought of what happened to him before seeing Tony's abnormal state. Everyone was shocked when they heard it. Then what should we do? Dr. Banner frowned. We can only beat him down. Thor clenched the hammer and was ready to go out. Levis didn't speak. He didn't want to expose the super ability of telepathy for the time being. After all, he also regarded everyone in the Avengers as friends. If everyone knew that he had telepathy, even if he didn't say it on the surface, he would definitely be on guard in his heart. After all, no one can normally be friends with a person who can always know his inner thoughts. But it was pretty easy to get Tony awake in the dark. Just as Thor was about to go out to put Tony down, the communication on the fighter rang. Hey, you must not believe me, I was just joking with you before. 9. Looking out the window, raising his hands and surrendering, and the sound of this saucy bag. Everyone immediately looked at each other. Is this guy recovering? 35. Steve couldn't believe it. Unbelievable, Dr. Banner said, rubbing his chin. Impossible. There's no way that ordinary people can break free from Loki's grip. 39. Hawkeye has the most say in this matter. Even a professionally trained and experienced top agent like him cannot get out of control on his own. He admits that Tony is a genius, but definitely doesn't believe Tony can get out of Loki's grip. Tony, you're not under control? Steve asked over the communicator. Definitely under control, but I just woke up suddenly. Tony couldn't explain it either. Natasha Romanoff didn't care too much about it. She definitely knew who brought Tony back to normal. But since Levi's didn't say it, she certainly wouldn't. I think the most important thing for us now is to close the portal. Let's talk about this later. Hearing this, no one objected. Soon, the plane landed on the ground. Look, what is that? I saw a light blue light shot into the sky on the top of the Stark Industrial Building. Immediately afterwards, the sky was suddenly twisted into a vortex, and a strange starry sky could be seen in the center of the vortex. Behind the starry sky, countless aircraft and spaceships rushed out. The invasion of the Chitauri army has officially begun. When Tony saw this move, Raw couldn't get it, so he flew directly into the sky and started blocking the Chitauri army. On the other side, Thor immediately chased after Loki's figure. Steve, as the captain, only felt a headache when he saw the two act without authorization. Can it make this place more chaotic, Captain? Dr. Banner asked at this time. The consciousness in his words is very obvious, and he is asking Steve if he wants to transform into Hulk. Once Hulk comes out, the scene may become more chaotic. Definitely, but there's no way to make you angry right now. 35. Seeing that the Chitauri army has begun to threaten ordinary people on the ground, Steve doesn't care. There is nothing more chaotic than this. Actually, I've always been angry. Dr. Banner has long been full of anger at Loki and the Chitauri who are wreaking havoc all over the city. As soon as he finished speaking, his body swelled up and turned into a Hulk. Wow! With a roar, Hulk instantly jumped to the tall building on the side, and then charged towards the Qitarui army. Steve was relieved to see this. Although the Hulk came out, he seemed to be able to tell who was the enemy. My plan is. Steve wanted to discuss closing the portal with Levi's, but when he turned around, only Hawkeye was still there. Levi's and Natasha Romanoff had long since disappeared. Where are they? Steve asked, looking at Hawkeye. Lisa, hell, I don't know when it disappeared. Hawkeye shrugged helplessly. Everyone was attracted by Chitauri in the sky just now, and no one knew when the two of them disappeared. At the same time, the other side. Levi's has brought Natasha Romanoff to the coffee shop where the X-Men are. The owner of the store had already been sent away by Clarice. Vice, what are you doing here with me? We should close the portal first, and then deal with the Chitauri army. Natasha Romanoff frowned. This is not in a hurry. Levi's smiled, then looked at Professor X and Magneto and said, Professor, have everything been arranged? Chapter 189 The Horror of the Chitauri Army. Don't worry, we have already arranged the task you explained. Professor X nodded. Now the entire New York has placed the X-Gene Awakening Potion, and the X-Gene Awakening Potion can be released to the entire town at any time. Magneto's eyes are hot. The age of mutants is coming, and no one is more excited than him. Levi's nodded with satisfaction. Now the X-Memory Awakening Potion is all over New York. As long as he gives an order, all the X-Gene potions will be released. Once the X-Gene Awakening medicine enters the air and is inhaled by ordinary people, it will awaken the X-Gene and become a mutant. By then the whole of New York will be a city of mutants. What the hell is going on? Natasha Romanoff was still a little confused. As you can see, Natasha Romanoff, we're starting the age of mutants, Levi's explained with a smile. Vice, is this your new idea? This is Sky and the others with a bad look on their faces. I thought you would know. 573. Levi's shrugged and didn't explain anything. Seeing his helpless appearance, the girls had to give up. After all, now is not the time to deal with this matter. At the same time, the Chitauri army came in full force. Some Chitauri driving small flying machines continued to destroy on the streets, and beams of explosions caused heavy losses to ordinary people. Yet these Chitauri are nothing. Shockingly, a semi-mechanized whale-like reptile giant flew down from the portal. This huge amount of monster was called Leviathan. The surface of Leviathan is attached with bone plates and scaly alien armor plates, giving it excellent defense ability and outer space activity ability. Now no one can destroy it except Thor and Hulk. And Leviathan was originally very destructive. I saw it hovering between tall buildings, and all the tall buildings collapsed wherever it passed. At the same time, it is also a large troop transport tool, and there are a lot of openings in the scales under it for the Zeta Swiss soldiers to eject and land. What makes people desperate is that there is not only one Leviathan, and there are Leviathan flying out from the portal in the sky one after another. In just a moment, most of New York has been caught in the flames of war. Seeing that the Chitauri army is increasing, everyone in the Avengers is also very anxious. Loki, Shut down the Tesseract or I'll destroy it. Thor threatened Loki with Mjolnir. You can't do it. Loki doesn't believe that Thor can destroy the portal, and the psychic scepter is pointing at Thor. It can't be stopped. Now all you can do is go to war. 35. Come on then. After being swiped by Loki so many times, even Thor, the brother-protecting madman, was a little angry at the moment, and he decided to teach this stupid little brother a good lesson. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Loki didn't hesitate at all, just picked up the scepter and rushed to melee. As a magician, and also the magic successor of Frigga behind him, he was always very dissatisfied with the fact that he could not defeat Thor in melee combat. I think it was Odin who gave Mjolnir to Thor, and now he has a more powerful artifact in his hand, so he is afraid of a hammer. At the beginning of the battle, it was surprising that Loki, XMan, actually had the upper hand, and there was even a cannonball left to blast a Hulk who was fighting the Leviathan not far away. Seeing that Hulk was knocked into the air, and the Leviathan flew into the sky again, Thor seemed to have enough anger all at once, as if possessed by the protagonist. He directly knocked Loki to the ground. However, when Thor had the upper hand, he was slow to take action. As a brother-protecting madman, even if his younger brother abused him thousands of times, he could still treat his younger brother like his first love. And Loki also took this opportunity to stab Thor with the backhand, and then slipped away. The other side. Tony's steel armor kept destroying Chitauri soldiers, but his firepower was limited after all. The careful missiles armed on the body were wasted just now, and now they can only use the palm cannons against the enemy. But this consumes a lot of energy, but fortunately, he instantly carries the backup battery, which is the last element reactor developed by Levis. Tony still discovered the new elements left by his father, and also used the new elements to create the arc reactor. However, he found that the energy of the last element reactor built by Levis actually had nearly 30% more energy than other arc reactors. Because of this, he has always been reluctant to use the end element material reactor, and is willing to use it only at critical moments. And now is the time. It's just that even if he is trying so hard, the Chitauri army will only increase. Steve and Hawkeye couldn't fly, and couldn't help much at all. Hey, can you hear me? Suddenly, Nick Fury's voice came from the headsets of the Avengers. The communication equipment on the helicarrier was destroyed and has just been repaired. Director, the situation is not optimistic now. Chitauri's army is increasing. Is there any support? Steve asked anxiously. I already know the situation and the army is on the way, but I'm not sure if the army can deal with these monsters. Nick Fury can clearly see the combat effectiveness of these Zeta Swiss soldiers through the screen. These soldiers are fully armored, and it is difficult for ordinary weapons to cause damage to them. Moreover, the opponent's weapons are very advanced, far from being able to be confronted by the army. But now they have no choice. Heavy firepower such as gunships cannot be deployed in cities at all. Chapter 190 Levi's plan, the nuclear bomb strikes. Can you close the portal? Just close the portal. Now Nick Fury's only hope is to close the portal. Just close the portal and the remaining Chitauri soldiers will be cleaned up sooner or later. Sorry, I can't do it. The tesseract that opens the portal has energy protection, so it can't be opened at all, Tony said helplessly. Hearing this, Nick Fury frowned. Is there really no way? By the way, what about? I haven't seen him since just now. If it were him, there might be a way to close the portal, Tony asked with some doubts. He still has some understanding of Levi's ability, Tony, but it is because of this understanding that he is even more puzzled, because he has absolutely no idea how strong Levi's is. But from the last Phoenix incident, Levi's strength is absolutely incredible. Tony wouldn't be surprised if he took down the Chitauri army by himself. Nick Fury was just about to ask this question, and the communication had not been restored before, so he had no idea what was going on. I don't know. It disappeared when the Chitauri army first appeared. Steve explained helplessly. Disappeared? How? Nick Fury frowned and thought, but he didn't understand where Levi's had gone at this time. And the last time I promised to let the mutants help, but now I have not seen any mutants. At the same time, in a coffee shop, Vice, shouldn't we make a move? If we don't make a move, the loss of ordinary people will be too great. Professor X was always too kind, seeing that the whole of New York was caught in the battlefield with heavy casualties, he still couldn't bear it. Don't worry, the army hasn't come yet. Levi's waved his hand and said calmly, the army has not yet come, which means that the hope in the hearts of ordinary people has not been dashed. Going out at this time, even if the Qitarui army is solved, ordinary people will only think that the army can do the same. If the hope in the hearts of ordinary people cannot be cut off, they will not build new hope. And Levi's is to stand up to save the world after ordinary people are completely desperate. Charles, you're still in a hurry. The ordinary people who go out now won't thank us. Magneto shook his head and said, he is obviously better at understanding human nature than Professor X. Storm, Cyclops and the others couldn't wait to get ready, but after hearing this, they all fell silent. Everything is being done now to usher in the age of mutants, so they have to endure. While they were talking, the New York army has finally arrived, and the gunships and tanks have been approved for use by the upper echelons. With these powerful weapons, the panic-stricken you finally have some comfort. Then came the battle between the Earth-human armed and the Chitauri army. However, unexpectedly, in just one encounter, the ground troops were already destroyed by the huge body of the Leviathan. The tank's shells can't do any damage to the Leviathan at all. In an instant, the ground troops collapsed. The gunships in the sky weren't much better either. In the face of countless Zeta-Swiss soldiers riding in small aircraft, the gunships were all destroyed in just a moment. Compared with maneuverability and aggressiveness, armed helicopters have no advantages at all. After the army was defeated, the belief of ordinary people collapsed. No one thought that the National Army, which was regarded as the savior, would be so vulnerable. Meanwhile, on the sky carrier, "Sir, a plane took off illegally, and it is determined that it has not received any authorization," its agent reported to the Hewitt. Seeking flowers. Nick Fury's complexion changed when he heard this, and then he picked up a single soldier bazooka and rushed out. Sure enough, a fighter plane was taking off quickly on the runway. Nick Fury blew up the right wing of the plane with an RPG without saying a word. However, just as he took a breath, another plane took off quickly. Nick Fury, who had no shells, dropped the bazooka angrily. Levi's telepathy couldn't help but sigh when he saw this. Nick Fury really didn't talk much, and planes with nuclear bombs were all dry. "Aren't you afraid of a nuclear bomb?" But fortunately, this plane was only for cover and did not carry nuclear bombs. And the other plane that has taken off is the plane with the actual nuclear bomb. In the communicator, Nick Fury's heavy voice reached everyone's ears. "Can Tony hear?" The nukes flew past. Hearing this news, Tony didn't have time to be shocked and hurriedly asked, "How long?" "In about 3 minutes. It's going to destroy the entire New York City area." "Damn, Jarvis gives all the energy to the thrusters." 35. Tony cursed inwardly, then hurried towards the fighter plane with the nuclear bomb. Yet at this time, the fighter plane with the nuclear bomb slowed down. Instead of firing a nuclear bomb, it spun around in the sky. At the same time, Levi's voice also appeared in Tony's ear. "Tony, I've got the nukes in control, so you don't have to go. Where the hell are you? Why don't you come and help?" Hearing his voice, Tony was very puzzled. What the hell was going on when he couldn't see him at this critical juncture? Chapter 191 X-Men vs. Chitauri Army. Haha tilde isn't this coming? You can find a place to rest and leave it to me. Levi's turned off the comm when he finished speaking, turning to look at the X-Men and laughing. "It's time for us to perform. Does the X-Gene Awakening Potion need to be released now?" Magneto also knew that the critical moment was coming and didn't dare to be careless. "Definitely, all X-Gene Awakening Potions must be released now." Levi's said that the sisters Phoebe and Sophie had been notified in the psychic network. Then the two sisters began to operate. The X-Gene Awakening Potion is installed in an automated device, and it only needs to be operated on the computer. The entire New York said that the X-Based 573 put-in will be released into the air due to the Awakening Potion. This operation is very simple. In just a moment, Marv had already received good news. "Okay, the X-Gene Awakening Potion has been released, and now it's time for us X-Men to be the saviors." Levi's turned to look at the Chitauri Army Road. After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and everyone disappeared in the coffee shop in an instant. After the space movement has become the power of space, he wants to use a large-scale space transmission as easy as eating and drinking. The next moment, on the Stark Industrial Building, "Fight for free. The goal is to kill as many Chitauri as possible, but be careful for your own safety." 99. Levi's told everyone. "Okay, I can't wait." After Logan finished speaking, he rushed out, and the adamantium alloy claws in his hand ripped apart a Zeta-Swiss soldier in an instant. When everyone saw this, they all dispersed. Then it's time for the X-Men show. I saw Cyclops continuously shooting shock waves, and one after another Zeta-Swiss soldiers in the sky were killed. And whenever a Zeta-Swiss soldier approached, Jean Grey would use psychokinesis to control each other, and the cooperation between the two really had some tacit understanding. At the same time, the sky also flickered with thunder. Storm flew into the air, and lightning bolts slashed at the Zeta-Swiss soldiers under her control. On the ground, Iceman and Pyroman controlled the dance of ice and fire, while a guy who was almost invisible passed by the Zeta-Swiss soldier. Immediately afterwards, the necks of the Zeta-Swiss soldiers were all cut off. It was Quicksilver who shot, perhaps because the opponent was an alien, so that Quicksilver, who was only in his teens, didn't have any hesitation. With the end element material dagger created by Levi's, no object can block a knife. And another street. Clarice and Little Naughty also shot. Clarice and Little Naughty's super abilities don't have many advantages in combat, but don't forget that they have fragments of the power of the Phoenix in their bodies. The power of these phoenixes is enough for them to exert the strength of 4th level mutants. Add, how strong are the 4th level mutants? They can easily destroy a house. Definitely this also depends on what super ability is. But the destructive power of the Phoenix Force goes without saying. As long as these Zeta Swiss soldiers are burned by the power of the Phoenix, they will instantly turn to ashes. Even their huge Leviathan is like this. Not to mention how wonderful the Battle of the Girls was. The other direction. Magneto's fight was the most shocking. After Levi's ascension, at the moment's Magneto ability has reached its peak. I saw him flying between the high-rise buildings and raising his hand slightly. The surrounding high-rise buildings were disintegrated in an instant, and countless steel and iron blocks formed a black torrent. Any Zeta Swiss soldiers who dare to approach will be crushed by the black torrent. Even the Leviathan is no exception. In just a moment, the entire battlefield has been controlled by the X-Men. It's too short. Tony was finally relieved to see this scene. Is this the power of mutants? It's too strong. Steve looked at the scene in shock. Although he knew the power of mutants before, he didn't know much about it. Apart from Levi's beating the Hulk and holding up the falling helicarrier, there is no intuitive feeling. However, it was only at this moment that he realized that the power of mutants had become so terrifying. Not to mention Steve, even Thor was shocked by this scene. Although his strength is very strong, he can't do such a devastating scene as Magneto. It has to be said that Thor is just a hammer god, and he is not the real Thor. On the sky carrier, Nick Fury finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the mutants take action on the big screen. But then he felt something was wrong. Why didn't the mutants take action in the first place? Instead, they waited until the army was defeated. If the shot was made earlier, the Qitarui army would not have been able to get in at all. However, no matter what Nick Fury thinks, 4.1 can't figure it out. At the same time, Levi's next plan has also begun. A worldwide live broadcast has already started under the control of Miss Misaka. Hundreds of millions of people have watched this alien invasion at the moment. Definitely, what they saw was more of mutants taking action to kill alien soldiers and then saving civilians. This is Levi's campaign for the mutants. He wants to let everyone in the world know, facing the alien invasion, heroes can't protect them, the army can't protect them, it's the mutants who stand up to protect them. Chapter 192 The Awakening of the Mutants. It's almost time. Under Levi's telepathy, I saw that the X-Gene Awakening potion that had just been released had already begun to take effect. At the moment, the whole city of New York is filled with fear, pain, and anger and sadness, and these strong negative emotions are the catalyst for the awakening of the X-Gene. Why do most mutants wake up successfully under extreme emotions? It is precisely because such extreme emotions can stimulate the awakening of the X-Gene in ordinary people. Originally, only 90% of the awakening success rate could even reach 99% in this environment. Greatly increases the awakening success rate. Meanwhile, not far from the Stark Industrial Building, Captain America and Thor both cover each other to fight Chitauri. Accidentally, Captain America was hit in the stomach by Chitauri's gun, and was knocked to the ground with a scream. What's wrong with you? Thor hurried to screen, clearing the 22 Chitauri around. Then he stood up with Thor's help. I'm okay, are you out of strength? Steve asked rhetorically, clutching the wound on his stomach. Thor looked at him to make sure there was no problem before looking around. Then an anomaly caught his attention. I saw two surviving military soldiers not far away, and they were about to die, but in the next moment, the two of them stood up again. One of them roared to avenge his brothers, and his whole body was covered with hair, like a werewolf, and his clothes were even torn by the suddenly swollen body. Not far away, a Zeta Swiss soldier sneaked a shot, but it only made the soldier who turned into a werewolf back a few steps. Immediately afterwards, the werewolf soldier gave up the firearm in his hand, and jumped to the front of the Zeta Swiss soldier. A pair of sharp claws instantly divided the Zeta Swiss soldier. Not only that, the other soldier also had some changes, and he saw his body swell and also covered with lush hair. But what he transformed into was not a wolf, but a giant bear. The giant bear, which is nearly 3 meters high, is almost comparable to the Hulk in size, and the destructive power and defense power are also very strong. Hey, are these two also mutants? Thor asked strangely. Steve shook his head. I don't know, but they should have been in the military before. 35. It is impossible for the military to recruit mutants as soldiers, and he is very clear about this. They just awakened the X-Gene to become mutants. At this time, Nick Fury's voice appeared in the ears of the Avengers, and through various monitoring, he clearly saw the awakening process of the two soldiers. Although it is a bit strange, it can only be considered that people are easily awakened to become mutants at the juncture of life and death. Sir, they are not an exception. In fact, I also feel some changes in my body. The speaker was Hawkeye standing on the roof, and at the moment he could clearly feel that his eyesight was better, and the perception of the surrounding danger has also become very strong. Even the sneak attack of the Chitauri soldiers behind him can easily respond, and then kill with one arrow. This feeling is very strange, and it makes him even more powerful. What? Even Hawkeye awakened as a mutant? This time Nick Fury is not calm. If it is 1 or 2, it is fine, but if there are 3, It is very abnormal. Sir, look at this. At this time, the Hill agent brought a tablet computer. Nick Fury took a look and saw that there were ordinary people with obvious physical changes in various regions. If nothing else, these ordinary people should have awakened and become mutants. What the hell is going on here? Nick Fury paced back and forth, and suddenly he seemed to think, he'll put me on his phone. Yes, sir. The Hill agent was no nonsense and got on the phone quickly. The other side. Levi's looked at the phone ringing in his hand and couldn't help showing a playful smile. It seemed that Nick Fury had guessed something, but he wasn't going to explain it now. Hang up the phone directly, and then use telepathy to appease the New Yorkers who have just become mutants. At the same time, a kind voice appeared in the ears of everyone in New York. Don't be afraid, don't panic. My countrymen, maybe you are in a dangerous predicament, maybe you will feel scared and lost. 573 inches. You have encountered an aggressive alien army. The heroes can't protect you, and the army can't protect you, but you should be able to feel the change in your body. That's right, you have become super ability users, and the next thing you can rely on is your own super ability. Use them to protect yourself. As these words sounded in everyone's mind, those who were afraid of their own changes were instantly relieved. As long as their changes are not the result of alien technology. At this moment, all the awakened mutants began to use their super ability to deal with the Chitauri army around them. These newly awakened mutants, although the ability is somewhat unstable, there is no lack of some ability perverted. These guys can easily take out Zeta Swiss soldiers. In an instant, the situation on the field was reversed. With Magneto's Brotherhood and the X-Men take out most of the Zetas. The Zeta Swiss soldiers scattered all over the city were killed by the mutants who had just awakened. Chapter 193 Baby Wanda, Angry Nick Fury. That voice just now. Hawkeye apparently heard that very kind voice too, but the voice that sounded like a child seemed to be the voice of an old man and finally a saint. He couldn't tell who it was. Obviously, that voice must be on the mutant side, maybe even Levi's. Steve frowned and guessed. He didn't notice any changes in his body, but he also felt that his body, which was still a little weak just now, became spiritual. It's not his voice, but it's possible that the voice changer might be turned on. But we can ask him now. 35. After Tony finished speaking, he flew towards the Stark Industrial Building. At the moment on the Stark Industries building, only Levi's and Professor X and Wanda are here. Wanda was too young, and she was Levi's sweetheart, so he didn't let her fight just now, but seeing her eager to try, he wouldn't be able to protect her all the time. Wanda, go if you want, I shouldn't be too protective of you. Levi's touched Wanda's little head and sighed. Vice, I'm actually very strong, those Zeta Swiss soldiers can't hurt me at all, and Pietro has already gone, and he's still so showy. Wanda pouted a little dissatisfied. Everyone has already started fighting, but she can only watch everyone show off here. Although she is protected, she can't be happy. Okay, you can go to Lorna and the others, so I can feel more at ease. Levi's waved his hand, and Wanda disappeared. At the same time, he used telepathy to tell Lorna and them to take good care of Wanda. At the moment Lorna and the others are very easy to deal with the Zeta Swiss soldiers, and they have no problem taking care of Wanda. It's finally here. Looking at the flames flying in the distance, Levi smiled faintly. Hey, Vice, should you explain what the hell is going on? Tony, who fell down, couldn't wait to ask the doubts in his heart. Tilda, isn't it obvious? The age of mutants is coming. Levi's shrugged. Sure enough, you did this thing to make everyone in New York mutants. To be honest, this plan is really crazy. Tony couldn't help but sigh. He didn't expect Levi's to do such a sensational thing quietly. However, I would like to ask why I didn't become a mutant. What super ability do I expect to awaken? Control fire or frost? Or make myself more handsome? Talking and talking, Tony started stinking again. But Tony's words also proved Levi's previous guess. The last time he had guessed that Tony had actually awakened to super ability after going through the life and death crisis of kidnapping. It's just that what he has awakened is the ability related to scientific research, which simply makes him more genius. Tony's genius is beyond an entire era, when others were still working on lithium batteries. He had created the arc reactor. This is really incredible, but if it is explained in terms of mutant awakening, it is very simple. It is precisely because Tony has awakened to the super ability about wisdom that he has superhuman wisdom. Actually, Tony, you have awakened super ability, but you just don't know it. Levi's briefly explained his guess. After all, the X-Gene Awakening Potion has no effect on those who have awakened super ability. This also explains why Tony didn't awaken super ability. With this explanation, Tony reluctantly accepted it. After all, he does feel that after being kidnapped, his thinking has become stronger, and things that he didn't understand before can be quickly understood, and he can draw inferences from other facts. And these words were also heard by Nick Fury and Steve. Nick Fury was a little angry. Vice, do you know what you mean by doing this? Facing Nick Fury's doubts, Levi smiled faintly. I just made the evolution of mankind advance, and now the Earth has opened the cosmic battlefield, but obviously we are not ready to face the cosmic civilization. And mutants are the best weapons in the face of cosmic warfare. You must have seen it. 99. Nick Fury definitely saw the mutants perform. Just a dozen mutants easily blocked the invasion of the Chitauri army. It can be said that these more than 10 mutants have already defeated the enemy that the National Army cannot defeat. But there are pros and cons. Once the era of mutants is opened, then their SHIELD agents will have no binding force in the face of these mutants. Then the whole world will be in chaos. It might even lead to a world war. Seeing that Nick Fury didn't speak for a long time, Levis directly closed the communication. He didn't have time to pay attention to the situation after SHIELD. He had to build Academy City, and it was based in New York. After all, the X-Gene Awakening pharmacy is limited today, and this time, all the stocks are used in the whole New York. No more can be made anytime soon. It will take some time for the world to enter the Age of Mutants. Chapter 194. The End of the War. The era of mutants officially begins. Don't think so much anymore. It's almost time now. Everyone in New York who should be awakened has awakened, and some hiding in basements or closed places can't do anything about it. After all, the X-Gene Awakening potion escapes into the air and cannot enter these closed environments. These X-Gene Awakening potions that escaped into the air were only effective for 2 hours, and after 2 hours they would be diluted by the air. Now is also the time to take down the Chitauri army. Looking at the Qitarui army that was still invading continuously in the sky, Levis couldn't help showing a sneer. Then he controlled the fighter plane carrying the nuclear bomb just now and rushed towards the portal. After the nuclear bomb was sent into the portal, the nuclear bomb exploded instantly, and the main fleet of Chitauri was directly destroyed. Immediately afterwards, Levis used the Mind Scepter to close the portal. After the main fleet of Chitauri was destroyed, the Chitauri army left on the Earth also lost control and fell to the ground. 577. This time, the war with alien civilization has finally come to an end. However, things didn't end there. Levis looked at the devastated New York City, and suddenly had a decision in his heart. I saw him fly into the sky, and then use telepathy to say in all the hearts of New York, God loves the world. God never forsakes his people, lost lambs, accept the glory of the Lord. 9. After a few words of flickering in a middle school, Levi suddenly released a large amount of golden light, and wherever the golden light went, the house was instantly restored by molecular manipulation. And some people who were seriously injured, or those who had only one breath left, also found themselves recovering. The whole of New York seemed to be renovated from the Stark Industrial Building, but in a moment the whole of New York recovered. To achieve this step, Levis has also used all his strength. Molecular manipulation, XMan, can be far more difficult than imagined. However, his harvest is also very good. People often say that God created the world. Although he did not create the world today, he is equivalent to creating New York and giving New York a new life. Those who survived had all experienced this war. After realizing that the surrounding houses and their injuries had recovered, they fell to their knees and began to worship God. The power of faith is terrifying. And at this moment, Levis has become the God that everyone in New York City believes in. Tony and Steve and the others were also stunned when they saw this scene. God, is this really something a human can do? Steve was beginning to wonder if Levis had been reincarnated, which was incredible. It is said that Vice code name is God. Originally, I wanted to laugh at him, but I didn't expect that he really did what God can do, Tony said with a shocked expression. This is too incredible, I can't believe it. Dr. Banner, who has always advocated science, looked in disbelief. From today, maybe he can really be a god. The person who said this was Nick Fury, and he knew there was no chance of that changing. The Age of Mutants officially begins today. He doesn't know if this is a good thing for Y, or the whole world, but their SHIELD must have some advantages in this change. Phil Coulson, I now have a very important task for you. Director, what's the matter? Phil Coulson, who received the communication, was a little puzzled. Contact as soon as possible after the matter is over. Where can I get the X-Gene Awakening potion from him, and other tasks can be put aside. This is the most important. 5. Yes, Chief. Phil Coulson knew the matter was very important and took it without a word. With the end of the war with aliens. Next, it's time to start cleaning the battlefield. Definitely, this job of cleaning the battlefield must not be done by the military, but by the mutants themselves. Use special methods at critical moments. Levis directly used the power of the mind to control the remaining mutants of the military who had awakened to form a law enforcement team. From today, New York is no longer under the management of Wygo. Instead, it belongs to the mutants themselves, and Academy City will start from this moment. The next day, the alien attack on New York did not end there, as yesterday's live video was exposed. More people saw the horror of aliens. At the same time, New York TV station also repeated yesterday's live video. The host spoke passionately about yesterday's battle. Everyone also saw the power of Chitauri, an aggressive civilization in the universe, and in this war of civilizations, the military has done absolutely nothing, and they even wanted to launch a nuclear bomb in New York. Speaking of which, the big screen behind the host is showing a plane with a nuclear bomb flying out of an aircraft carrier in the sky. The plane in the picture is very clear and cannot be faked at all. Everyone who saw this scene was in an uproar. They had no idea that the ugly country would actually do such a crazy thing. Want to release a nuclear bomb in a big city like New York? Maybe their purpose is to stop the alien invasion, but the citizens of New York don't care about that. They only care that their lives are seriously threatened. Chapter 195 Nick Fury's request. But everyone, don't hold the army too accountable, because we humans have stood up completely. We have been gifted by God, and we have become new humans. No, we should be called super ability. Do you want to know what my super ability is? 99. The host digressed as he talked, but it was obvious that the audience also wanted to know what his super ability was. I know everyone is very interested, so I will tell you. The host said that he ripped open his jacket with both hands, revealing Superman's clothes inside, and then his originally thin body swelled up instantly. It does look a bit like Superman. Yes, I am Superman. The host laughed proudly. At the same time, in the Mutant Academy, Levis, with Natasha Romanoff and Lorna in his arms, is watching TV news in the room for a limited time. Seeing the host's praised performance, the naughty little one on the side couldn't help laughing out loud. This guy doesn't think he's really Superman. This may not be the case. Although Superman is in the DC world next door, he might cross over at some point. Definitely, Levi's was just joking. The New York war is now over a day. However, New York City did not calm down, although he saved everyone who didn't die, and restored houses and everything. But the dead are still irretrievable. But to appease and clean up New York City, Levi's has left it to Professor X and Magneto. With Professor X's telepathy, he should be able to stabilize the entire city soon. After all, New York now has its own beliefs. Since the citizens of New York knew that their lives had been given up by the Chi Kingdom, they also abandoned the Y Kingdom. Now they live in new identities. At this moment, the door opened, and baby Wanda ran over. Wanda, why are you in such a hurry? Levi's looked at her suspiciously. Vice, there's a black egg looking for you outside. Wanda pointed to the door. Black eggs? Levi's expression was a little weird when he heard the name Raw. It is no surprise that the person who can be called Raw must be Nick Fury. As predicted, just outside the door are Nick Fury and Phil Coulson. Come with me. Knowing they must have a lot to talk about, Levi's took them to the war room. If you have anything, just say it directly. I don't like to beat around the bush. Okay, then I'll tell you straight. Nick Fury nodded and said no nonsense. We SHIELD need the X-Gene Awakening Potion, and I hope you can provide us as much as possible, Vice. Oh? This statement surprised Levi's, who thought that Nick Fury was trying to find a way to indulge him. In fact, he thought too much. With his amazing performance yesterday, who would dare to offend him? Nick Fury is no fool. Do you want to be a mutant too, Director? With all due respect, it is impossible for you to become a European even if you become a mutant. Levi's joked with a smile. Nick Fury's face darkened when he heard this. Phil Coulson on the side said, we are here with sincerity this time. Don't you want to start the era of mutants? If you hand over the X-Gene Awakening Potion to us, it is also to start the era of mutants. Effort. Well, it's not that I can't give it to you, but we have already used up all the X-Gene Awakening Potions we have produced. If you want it, you have to wait for a while, and I will not give it for nothing. Seeking flowers. Levi's waved out a finger. Definitely, we will give you a satisfactory price, said 35 Phil Coulson hastily. Okay, so what else? Levi's yawned and stretched. Nick Fury, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. Vice, what are you going to do in the end? What? Didn't you see it? Levi's shrugged. I did see that the age of mutants started because of you. And then what? You're going to rule the world? Nick Fury stared at him quietly. Rule the world? Levi smiled disdainfully. I don't have that idea. If I wanted to, I could do it anytime. He is not interested in ruling the world or anything. He just finds it interesting, so he wants to build an academy city. And this sentence surprised Nick Fury. Although this is a bit of a fantasy, if it is Levi's, he firmly believes in it. The conversation ended, and Nick Fury and Phil Coulson left the Mutant Academy. In the end, they negotiated a price, and the X-Gene Awakening Potion could be traded with them first after it was made. As for the price, it is initially set at $100,000 per bottle. Definitely, the specific deal Levi's has been handed over to Maffy and Phoebe to decide. Nick Fury's purpose is definitely very clear. If you want to have a say in the next era of mutants, then you must cultivate your own mutant army. Otherwise, it will only be eliminated by history. Anyway, the X-Gene Awakening Potion was produced for the use of ordinary people, so there is nothing wrong with making some money for SHIELD. Chapter 196 Going to Asgard. A few days passed in the blink of an eye. In the face of New York, which is now a city of mutants, Wygo obviously does not want to compromise. Although the army did little to deal with the Chitauri army, that was why they were not much prepared. And once ready, the deterrent of this military power is still very strong. The top officials of the ugly country and the World Security Council even want to use the nuclear bomb again to clean up this mutant city. However, The next day, all the nuclear bombs in the world were manipulated by Levis and launched into outer space. This move directly made the whole world almost scared to pee, that someone could do such an unimaginable thing. May 77 inches. If the target of these nuclear bombs is not outer space, I am afraid the whole Earth will be finished. And without nuclear deterrence, the ugly country and the World Security Council will immediately admit to it. Definitely, letting these people confess is just the first step. This time, Levis will not let anyone who wants to advocate the launch of nuclear bombs let go. The next day, these high-level personnel were reported dead in their homes. This move once again deterred the senior officials of the ugly country and the World Security Council, and now they no longer dared to move their minds. President Y can only acquiesce to the existence of mutant cities. Some people don't want to be mutants, but some people crave great power. After learning that New York has the awakening potion that turns ordinary people into mutants, many rich people or people with ulterior motives all gathered. In this regard, Levis doesn't mind selling the X-Gene awakening potion for sky-high prices. If nothing else happens next, New York City will enter a period of rapid development. If there was a city full of mutants, what would you use it for? Levi's choice is definitely to develop technology. It must be known that some mutants who have awakened the ability in scientific research are of great help in researching various technologies. Some mutants have abilities that science simply cannot explain, and it's really more efficient to use it to research technology. It is conceivable that in just a few years, New York will become the most developed city in the world and become a real academy city. A few days later, Thor came over. The purpose is self-evident. After all, if Thor wants to bring Loki back to Asgard, he must use the Tesseract. And now the Tesseract and the Mind Scepter are all in Levi's hands. Needless to say, I already know your purpose. Before Thor could speak, Levi's waved his hand, then took out the Tesseract and threw it at him. Thor was still a little confused when he took over the Tesseract. He thought it would be very difficult to take the Tesseract from Levi's. After all, no one will give up easily. Unexpectedly, before he could speak, Tesseract gave it to him. Thanks. Thor thanked him anyway. Anyway, we used to be comrades in arms, so it's nothing to do this. Levi's patted his shoulder and smiled. Give the Tesseract to Thor, definitely to elicit bigger fish. After all, several other Infinity Stones are distributed in the universe, and if you want to actively collect them, you don't know how long it will take. But if the Tesseract is handed over to Thor, and Thanos is brought out, then it's a lot easier. Because as long as there are Infinity Stones on Earth, Thanos will take the initiative to deliver all the other Infinity Stones to the door. After a while, the Avengers held a farewell ceremony for Thor. After this time, they will disband the organization of the Avengers. They will gather again when they are needed. I hope we can fight together next time. After this battle, although Tony was still a little unhappy with him, he was actually very regretful in his heart. There will be a chance, then everyone, goodbye. Thor smiled at everyone and then started Tesseract. The next moment, the two disappeared in front of them. Have they returned to Asgard? Natasha Romanoff asked, looking up at the sky. I think so. Do you want to go to Asgard? Levi's giggled and hugged Natasha Romanoff's thin waist. You can go to Asgard. Natasha Romanoff was a little surprised, but she didn't doubt it. Definitely. 99. Don't forget that Levi's is in control of the power of space. Just when Thor used Tesseract to return to Asgard, he had already tracked down the exact coordinates of Asgard. If you want to go, it's just a thought. Hey, Vice, are you telling the truth? Actually, I've been wanting to go to Asgard for a while. How about taking me? 1:35. Seeing this, Tony hurriedly walked over to 4.1. He has been very interested in Asgard's technology since the last time he studied the Destroyer. If there is a chance, he will definitely not let it go. Okay then. Anyone else going? Levi's didn't refuse. He looked at Dr. Banner, Steve, and Hawkeye. I'm not going. Do I still have research? Dr. Banner shook his head. Steve and Hawkeye apparently didn't have much interest in it either. Okay then. Levi's shrugged indifferently, then grabbed Tony, and the three disappeared in front of everyone in an instant. Chapter 197. The first sight of Odin, the king of the gods. On Asgard Bifrost. Thor and Loki brothers had just returned, and Heimdall, who was beside him, laughed. You guys are back. I hate your smile. 99. Loki was very upset to see Heimdall. After all, the last time Heimdall brought Thor back from Earth, it ruined his plan. Heimdall didn't change his expression, but then he was stunned for a moment, because three people suddenly appeared behind Thor. Excuse me, who are you? With Heimdall's question, Thor and Loki also find the Levi's trio behind them. Why are you here? Thor's face was full of astonishment, completely unaware of how the three of them came to Asgard. It's very simple, it's just using space teleportation. Don't you welcome us, Thor? Levi's smiled with his arms crossed. Welcome, definitely welcome. Originally, I planned to invite you to Asgard. 39. Thor, who was 22, didn't bother about how they came, but laughed happily. After all, they are also friends of Thor Earth. When friends from the Earth come to be guests, he definitely cannot be neglected. At Thor's invitation, everyone came to the Asgard Palace together. It just so happened that a banquet was being held in the palace. Father, this is Levi's, this is Tony, And this is Normanoff's agent. They are all my friends on Earth. If it wasn't for their help this time, I'm afraid Loki's conspiracy would have succeeded. 35. Thor came to Odin and introduced Levis and the three of them. I definitely know that this banquet is for our friends. Odin got down from the throne and came to Levis and said, "The Ancient One magician once mentioned you to me, Mr. Levis, but look at it now. You are stronger than I thought." At the moment Odin can be said to be a little shocked. He had no idea that midget mutants could be so powerful. Definitely, if it's just mutants, he's not afraid. The point is that Odin felt the power of the Phoenix from Levis, and the power of the Phoenix was unbelievably powerful. I am afraid that even if he wears the Destroyer armor in his peak state, he may not be able to defeat it. God Odin, you have won the prize. Although I am on Earth, I have heard of the name of Odin. Asgard is indeed the guardian of the 9 realms. 5. There was a wave of business exchanges. In fact, Levis did not expect Odin to respect him so much. It seems that Odin already understands that he has the power of the Phoenix. "Mr. Vice, please come with me." Loki midget, "No, it's the Earth that caused the irreversible war, and I'll give you an explanation." Odin brought Levis to the throne and looked down. This place is not accessible to ordinary people, and only those who are recognized by him will give the highest respect. At this time, 2 Asgard warriors came up with chains pulling Loki. Loki sneered at the serious-looking Odin and Levis beside him. "I really don't know which one you played this. What? Do you want to condemn me?" Thor on the side was a little anxious when he saw that Loki dared to talk back like this. Until now he still cares about this younger brother very much. However, Odin's eyes glanced at him, and he shut his mouth immediately. "Don't you really know that you are already sinful?" Odin looked at Loki with a serious face and said, "Wherever you go, you will bring war and death." Loki interrupted him with a sneer, "I, as a benevolent god, just go to Midgard to rule them, just like you." Hearing this, Odin shook his head and said, "We are not gods. We also have birth, old age, sickness and death, just like humans. But we have 5,000 years of life." Loki still wanted to justify lifespan, but Odin didn't want to argue with him about this pointless thing. All of this happened because of Loki's quest for the throne. "That's my power," Loki interrupted. "Your power is death." 577. Odin couldn't help scolding any longer. "Your power is the death of childhood, abandoned on cold rocks. If I hadn't brought you back, you might not have been would hate me like this." 99. Odin said the words in his heart at once, and he once had some regrets. Regret picking up Loki, the giants of Jotunheim, and raising him as a son. And that made Loki sad. "If I don't deserve to live, then please merciful you to give me a death." As soon as these words came out, Odin was driven to a dead end. Originally, if there were no Levis and the other 3 Earthlings, how to deal with Loki completely depends on his mood. But now he has to give Levis an explanation, because in his opinion, Levis is the inheritor of the Ancient One and the representative of the Earth, and its strength is even more powerful to the level of terror. He couldn't defend Levis at this time. After all, his time limit has come, and he won't be able to live for long. Chapter 198 Signing in to Odin, the Prophecy of Ability. It's up to Mr. Vice to judge the crimes that Loki committed against the Earth. Odin looked at Levis beside him. "Am I to decide?" Levis touched his chin and smiled. "Speaking of which, it's too late to thank Loki. After all, if there was no New York War this time, the era of mutants would not have been so logically opened. And if it wasn't for Loki, he wouldn't have gotten the Infinity Stones either. So, Levis has to thank Loki for that. And the other Infinity Stones after that need his help more or less, so Loki definitely can't die now." That is, when he was thinking, Thor on the side was extremely nervous, for fear that he would kill Loki directly. "Odin, I think you should handle this matter yourself. Although Loki has caused a lot of damage to the Earth, it is not a bad thing for today's people on Earth." 35. "Oh. Do you think so?" Odin couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he heard what he said. After all, Loki was raised by him for so many years. If he really wanted to kill Loki directly, he definitely didn't want to. "Loki, if Mr. Vice didn't hold you accountable and pleaded with Frigga, you'd already be dead, so I've decided to keep you in dungeon for the rest of your life." Odin's voice fell, and the 2 Asgard warriors dragged Loki down. "And what about Thor? You're going to make that idiot king?" Before leaving, Loki was still obsessed with the throne. "Thor has to clean up the mess you left behind. He has to restore order to the 9 kingdoms, and you're right, Thor will become the king of Asgard." 99. After Odin finished speaking, the 2 Asgard warriors pulled Loki down. "Sorry, Mr. Vice, you've made a joke. The banquet has already started. Please take a seat." Seeing that Loki's matter was resolved perfectly, Odin directly pulled Levis to sit down and drink happily. For Odin, who was once the strongest man in the 9 realms, Levis has always maintained a sense of awe, and cannot despise anyone because his strength has surpassed Odin. Why be friends when you can be enemies? And once he has established a good relationship with Asgard, he may also be able to borrow Bifrost to enter other 9 realms, which will be very convenient for him to sign in. Speaking of which, though, He hasn't signed on Odin yet. Ding. Is the host checking in? Double experience or super ability? Sign into super ability. Ding. Sign in is successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the super ability prophecy, with 100 experience points. According to legend, Odin is the king of the gods, possessing powers such as time, prophecy, kingship, wisdom, healing, magic, poetry, war and death. What Levis didn't expect was that this sign-in actually gave him the ability to prophesy. Simply put, prophecy can let him know the past and the future, and any unfavorable things can be predicted in advance. Is a very powerful ability. At the moment he was even able to foresee a future disaster for Asgard, one after Odin's death. The source of the disaster is Odin's eldest daughter, Loki, and Thor's sister, Hela, the goddess of death. After Hela has absorbed the power of Asgard, even Odin in his heyday must be on par with him. Loki and Thor are no match for Hela at all. It can be said that there are not many people in the 9 realms who want to find someone who can defeat Hela, and Levis is one of them. And he also saw a strange picture. It shouldn't be possible. Maybe I saw flowers. Levis shook his head and continued drinking with Odin. The people of Asgard are very simple, and if they can drink with them, they are good brothers. If they can beat them in terms of alcohol, it will be even more incredible. Then they will call you Aurora Warrior. Warrior, do you remember me? Levis turned his head and saw that Fandral, one of the 3 Asgard warriors, came over with a wine bowl. It's Fandral. Long time no see. Ha ha Tilda, I didn't expect you to remember me. Come, I'll give you a toast. Fandral said. He picked up the big bowl and dried it directly. Since you're so forthright, Fandral, I can't be left behind. I've done it too. 35. After Levis finished speaking, he picked up the bowl and went straight to dry. Okay, warrior, your alcohol intake is really good. I'll discuss with you when you have time. Let's talk first. Knowing that he was Odin's guest, Fandral didn't waste much time, turning around and returning to their own wine table. Odin also showed a relieved smile when he saw this scene. It seemed that the successor of the Ancient One was still very good. At the end of the banquet, Levis and Odin can be considered happy to see each other, and after the banquet, Tony suddenly asked Thor to learn about Asgard's technology. For this small request, Odin definitely agreed. Levis originally planned to take Natasha Romanoff back, but Lizazo was held back by Odin. In an underground vault, Levis wondered why Odin had brought him here. Mr. Vice, God King Odin, just call me. Levis laughed. Well then, Vice, if I read it right, you should have the power of the Phoenix, right? Yes, I do have the power of the Phoenix. Levis nodded. The power of the Phoenix is one of the most powerful forces in the universe, but because of this, there are many people who have coveted the power of the Phoenix, so I hope you can be vigilant and take good control of this power. After saying this, Odin turned around and came to a corner of the underground treasure house, and took out a small box from the trap. Chapter 199 Odin's Gift, the Power of the Phoenix. When Odin opened the small box, he saw a crimson stone being stored inside. Levi's eyes lit up when he saw the stone, and he could feel the power of the Phoenix being sealed in the stone. God Odin, this is. Many years ago, I fought in the south and the north and met many strong men, and the power sealed in this stone was the strong man who once controlled the power of the Phoenix. After I defeated him, the other party would rather die than commit suicide, and this power of the Phoenix was also obtained at that time. 35. Odin sighed and recalled the events of his youth, and then put the small box in his hand. God King Odin, is this for me? Levis was a little surprised. How could this power of the Phoenix simply be given to him? Odin smiled and nodded and said, it's just a waste to keep this thing in Asgard, and it's easy to cause disaster. If you don't dislike it, I'll give it to you. Then thank you God King Odin. You can say anything if you need me. In the face of the power of the Phoenix in his hands, he is not hypocritical. This thing is exactly what he needs. And if he guessed 577 correctly, Odin must have something to help him when he took this thing out. Odin sighed. I can see a disaster in the future for Asgard. Who is it? Her name is Hela. She is Thor's sister. She fought with me for many years, but it was a pity that she was immersed in the war and couldn't extricate herself, and was finally sealed by me. 99. It's impossible to beat Hela with Thor's strength, so you want me to help Thor defeat Hela? That's definitely no problem. Levis resolutely agreed after learning of Odin's request. It's just a small favor compared to the power of the Phoenix. This deal is completely worth it. This has a causal relationship with what was previously predicted. Thanks a lot. Odin nodded in thanks. After a day at Asgard Palace, Levis returned to Earth with Natasha Romanoff and a somewhat reluctant Tony. Open it up and see what's inside. Before leaving, Frigga gave Natasha Romanoff a small box, and Levis was also a little curious about what was inside. Really, Vice didn't take us to see the legendary Asgard this time. It's too eccentric. The little naughty looked at the exquisite small box in Natasha Romanoff's hand, and said with some envy. Levis spread his hands helplessly after hearing this. It's just a temporary idea. I'll take you the next time when I have a chance. 33. Let's not talk about it, let's see what's in the box. Sky is very interested in the contents of the small box. Seeing this, Natasha Romanoff opened the box without further ado. After the box was opened, there was a book inside, to be precise, a magic book. Frigga is a powerful magician, and Loki's illusion magic is all taught by Frigga. The magic book she gave was naturally unusual. Row is that Levis is a little interested. After all, he also has this automatic secretary super ability. If you collect 103,000 little yellow books, it will not be weaker than Odin. And the power of magic is very mysterious. Even he might be hit when, so he cannot use magic, but not without magic. Except when Natasha Romanoff opened the magic book, a golden light disappeared into Natasha Romanoff's mind. Levis was startled, relieved after confirming that Natasha Romanoff was okay. Natasha Romanoff, what happened to her? The girls were also a little worried when they saw this. Everyone, don't be arrogant. Natasha Romanoff is fine, she should have acquired a magical inheritance. Even he didn't think that this was not just a magic book, but a magic book with inheritance. Just don't know how much magic Natasha Romanoff can inherit. After a while, Natasha Romanoff finally woke up. How about Natasha Romanoff? Is it inherited some magic? Is it powerful? What the hell is magic? Can we learn it? You give me a pause and listen to Natasha Romanoff first. Seeing the little Naughty and Katie, they kept asking with interest, and Levis could only interrupt them. It's a magic called illusion, which can be used to confuse the enemy. The knowledge of this magic is in this magic book. As for whether you can learn it or not, I don't know. Natasha Romanoff smiled and shook her head. Illusion? Is that the magic Loki used to play with his brother? Lorna asked curiously. It should be that one. Natasha Romanoff nodded. This magic is not bad, Shan said with envy. She also awakened the super ability before. But this super ability is a bit tasteless. It can only keep the temperature of the object. For example, if a small flower is picked, after passing through her ability, it will not wither for several days. But even if it is raised to the level of a third-level mutant, it has no combat power at all. Don't be envious, you can't learn it. Levis shrugged, thinking they hadn't learned any magic at Qitarui for a month. How could this kind of police illusion be learned? HMPH. It's not your fault if you can't learn it. Katie looked at him with dissatisfaction. If it wasn't for the fact that they often couldn't get out of bed, how could they not even learn a magic trick? Chapter 200. Integrate the power of the Phoenix and go back to the past. For Katie's words, Levis had no way to refute and had to turn around and study the power of the Phoenix given by Odin. I'm going to integrate the power of the Phoenix. You can first try to learn this magic. If anyone can learn it, how about I promise her a condition? The girl's eyes lit up when they heard this. This is what you said. If I learn this magic, I will definitely ask you, Vice, to take me to enjoy the two-person world. Katie is very envious of the little Naughty and Clarice, so they have this requirement. Definitely no problem. Levis nodded readily. Seeing his promise, the girls ignored him and turned to study magic. Although they didn't learn magic last time in Qitarui, they at least understood. On the other side, Levis saw this and disappeared in place. When he appeared again, it was already on Skull Island. King Kong, is this time okay? Seeing King Kong still sleeping on the ground, Levis woke it up with a smile. Roar tilde. When King Kong woke up, he roared excitedly when he saw him. After no natural enemies, King Kong is truly the king on Skull Island, but he hasn't seen each other for a while, and his height and size have grown a circle. Seeing that King Kong was so excited, Levis had no choice but to use the power of space to take out a few cows from the farm and start the barbecue. When King Kong saw this, he sat on the ground with excitement and stared straight at the roasted whole cow in front of him. Ever since eating this baked food, King Kong has been looking forward to Levi's arrival every day, so that he can bake food for him. Levi's was also dumbfounded to discover that King Kong had become a foodie by him. After roasting a few whole cows for King Kong, Levi's ordered King Kong not to disturb him, and then he took out the stone that Odin gave to seal the power of the Phoenix. I don't know how strong this Phoenix power can make me become. It seems that he felt the power of the Phoenix, and the Phoenix couldn't help but drilled out of his body. Vice, have you found another piece of lost power? Great. Phoenix looked at the stone in front of her with a face of surprise. She could feel that the power of the Phoenix in this stone was stronger than the power of the Phoenix possessed by the Lord of Hell before. I said, I will restore you to your heyday, and then find the person who attacked you back then to avenge you. Levi smiled lightly. Vice, you are my best host. Phoenix was very moved when he heard this. Some of the hosts that Phoenix had hosted before were afraid of her power, and some didn't even dare to use her power, so no host would have the idea of restoring her power at all. Until now, she feels that Levi's is her best host. Okay, it's time to absorb this Phoenix power. Levi stopped talking nonsense and broke the seal on the stone directly. The next moment, a sharp bird chirping sounded, and then a flame of fire shot straight into the sky from the stone, forming a flame phoenix in the sky. Come back. 35. Levi's waved his hand when he saw this, and he waved out the powerful Phoenix power, wanting to take back the flame phoenix. However, what surprised him was that this flame phoenix seemed to have formed its own consciousness. and she did not want to be absorbed. Character. But that's it. The powerful phoenix power blasted out again, and the sky turned red. King Kong, who was eating a roasted whole cow, could only prostrate himself to the ground under this powerful force. Levi's phoenix power absorbs too much phoenix power. Although the phoenix power in front of him is also relatively strong, in the end, he can't escape the end of his absorption. Seeking flowers, and after absorbing this phoenix power, he clearly felt that his strength was one step closer. Ha ha ha! Tilda. King Kong, eat it. You're welcome. Levi's, who was in a good mood, landed on King Kong's shoulders, and when he saw his timid appearance, he suddenly laughed out loud. After absorbing the power of the phoenix, he also planned to go back, but he suddenly remembered that the matter of Natasha Romanoff has not been completely resolved. Now he has to go back and change Natasha Romanoff's history. That's a given. Add 0. If he hadn't changed the past, then the fragments of the Phoenix Force within Natasha Romanoff could not have appeared, and thus would have contradicted each other. There is nothing to do now, so he used traveling, and the next moment he disappeared on Skull Island. When Levi's reappeared, it was the year of Sue in 1928. After searching telepathically, there was no trace of Natasha Romanoff. It looks like Natasha Romanoff's wife has just been born. No wonder I couldn't find any trace of Natasha Romanoff after searching around. It turned out that he came too early. Unfortunately, he used traversal again to come a few years later. This time he finally found information about Natasha Romanoff's family in an agent base somewhere in the Soviet Union. The 4 members of Natasha Romanoff's family, except the youngest sister Yelena, are all the agents of Million lurking in Y. Definitely, Levi's knew very well that the happy family of 4 in front of them was just forcibly put together. The 4 of them are not related by blood at all. If you like this audiobook, subscribe the channel for more videos like this. And join my Patreon if you want to support me. Link is in the description. Leave some comment and let me know if you guys like this story, or you have a web novel you like and want to hear its audiobook. I will be happy to create them for you. Please like, share, and leave a comment on the video.